Welcome, friends. Come on in and make yourself comfortable. Whether you're curled beneath a familiar blanket, resting your head against a soft pillow, or simply allowing the last thoughts of a long day to settle, I am very glad you're here. Perhaps the room around you is dim now, lit only by the gentle glow of a bedside lamp. Perhaps the house has grown quiet, and beyond the window there is little to hear except the occasional passing car, the wind against the glass, or the faint sounds of another evening drawing to its close. There is nowhere else you need to be for a while. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the darkness feel peaceful rather than empty, and allow the slow rhythm of another age to carry you away from the hurried world outside. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these journeys into the past. And let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. It is always comforting to imagine so many quiet rooms, in so many distant places, sharing the same story beneath the same night sky. Tonight, we're stepping back into the private world of a Victorian lady, not as she appeared in a crowded drawing room or beneath the bright chandeliers of a formal dinner, but in the quieter hours before the household had fully awakened. We are entering a bedroom behind a firmly closed door, in a large townhouse or country manor during the middle decades of the 19th century, when the morning began long before its mistress was expected to rise. Outside, the sky is still pale and uncertain, the rooftops are dark against the approaching dawn, and a thin mist may be hanging above the garden lawns or drifting between the narrow streets. Inside the house, however, the day has already begun. In the servants' quarters, a bell has not yet summoned anyone from above, but several members of the household staff are awake. The kitchen maid moves carefully across cold flagstones, carrying kindling in her apron. The scullery maid bends over a range that has gone dull during the night, coaxing life from yesterday's embers. Coal dust settles upon her fingers as she feeds the grate, and soon the first faint warmth spreads through a kitchen still heavy with the smells of soap, ashes, damp cloth and stored food. No one can quite agree whether wealthy Victorian households always operated with the perfect clockwork discipline described in domestic manuals. Real homes were filled with tired servants, stubborn fires, misplaced keys, cracked jugs, and masters who changed their plans without warning. Yet the ideal remained powerful. The house was expected to awaken invisibly, as though warmth, hot water, polished boots, and breakfast simply appeared of their own accord. Upstairs, the lady of the house is still sleeping. Her bedroom is not entirely silent. The coal in the grate has collapsed into a faint red hollow, occasionally producing a soft click as the cooling metal shifts. Heavy curtains surround the bed, though by the Victorian period they are more often decorative than necessary in well-appointed rooms. Their folds hold back drafts and create a small sheltered chamber around the sleeper. In winter, such protection matters. Even grand houses can be bitterly cold before sunrise. Their high ceilings and wide corridors preserving chill as efficiently as dignity. The bed itself may be made from carved mahogany or dark walnut, its polished posts rising above a mattress stuffed with horsehair, wool, or feathers. Beneath the lady lie linen sheets and thick blankets, perhaps covered by an embroidered counterpane. A warming pan may have been passed between the sheets the previous evening, its metal container filled with hot coals and moved slowly across the bed by a servant. The practice was comforting, though it carried a small risk of scorching the linen or leaving behind the unmistakable smell of smoke. Near the bed stands a small table holding a candle, a box of matches, a glass of water, and perhaps a silver watch. There may also be a porcelain chamber pot discreetly hidden inside a wooden cabinet known as a commode. Even in wealthy homes, bathrooms are not always close at hand. Indoor plumbing is spreading during the Victorian era, but its arrival is uneven, expensive, and occasionally regarded with suspicion. Some physicians worry that pipes might carry dangerous vapours into the house. And many older buildings continue to depend upon basins, jugs, and servants carrying water up narrow staircases. On one wall hangs a bell pull connected by wire to the servants' area below. A single tug can summon the lady's maid, though it would be improper to ring without reason. Victorian etiquette governs even the act of waking. A respectable lady is not expected to leap from bed and hurry into the corridor. Her morning must unfold gradually, supported by unseen preparation. Elsewhere in the house, doors are being unlocked. A footman carries a coal scuttle along the passage, placing each step carefully so that the metal does not strike the wall. Another servant draws back shutters in the breakfast room, where the furniture is covered in shadow. Dust sheets may protect certain chairs when the family is away. But in an occupied home, the room waits ready polished table, folded newspaper, silver toast rack, and a vase whose flowers were arranged the previous afternoon. The hall smells faintly of beeswax, used to polish wooden floors and furniture. In some homes, servants scatter damp tea leaves before sweeping carpets because the leaves are believed to collect dust and prevent it from rising into the air. It's a practical custom and a curious one, leaving the faint scent of yesterday's tea beneath the morning's work. A housemaid climbs toward the upper floors with a covered can of hot water. The vessel is heavy, and the staircase seems longer with every step. She may have been awake since 5 o'clock, though the lady she serves will not appear downstairs for several hours. Her work must be completed before it can be observed. Grates are cleaned, ashes removed, fresh coal arranged, rugs brushed, and washstands prepared. The division between night and morning is therefore not marked by a single moment. It moves through the house floor by floor, below stairs. The day is already bright with labour. Above stairs, darkness remains behind curtains and closed doors. Victorian sleeping arrangements vary greatly according to wealth, marriage, health, and personal preference. A husband and wife may share a room, occupy adjoining rooms, or sleep in separate chambers connected by a private dressing room. Popular imagination often assumes that strict morality kept married couples apart, but surviving letters and household plans suggest a more complicated reality. Some valued privacy, others shared beds for warmth or companionship. Historians continue to debate how common separate bedrooms truly were outside the richest homes. Children, if there are any, sleep in the nursery wing beneath the supervision of a nurse. Guests occupy rooms along another corridor. Servants are placed in small attic chambers, often beneath sloping roofs where winter frost gathers inside the windows. The architecture itself reflects the social order. Large rooms face the garden or street, while narrow passages and back staircases allow servants to move through the building without crossing formal spaces. Beyond the windows, dawn slowly gathers. A milk cart rattles over the road. Somewhere in the distance, a church clock marks the hour with a softened bell. The sound travels across wet rooftops and empty gardens, entering the room only as a faint vibration behind the glass. For a little longer, the lady remains still beneath her blankets. She is protected from the cold, the ash, the water cans, and the hurried preparation occurring around her. Yet her comfort depends upon all of it. The private mourning of a Victorian woman begins before she opens her eyes, shaped by the work of people she may scarcely see until later in the day. The fire downstairs grows stronger. Steam begins to rise from a kettle. Curtains are drawn in distant rooms, and the first weak light spreads across polished banisters and framed portraits. Soon there will be a quiet knock at the bedroom door, the soft entrance of a trusted maid, and the careful rituals of waking. But for now, the great house hovers between darkness and day, its mistress still sleeping while unseen hands gently prepare the world she's about to enter. The knock comes softly, scarcely louder than the settling of the coal in the grate. It is not the brisk knock of a tradesman at the kitchen entrance, nor the formal announcement of a visitor below stairs. It is a private sound, measured and respectful, followed by a pause long enough for the sleeping woman to stir. Then the handle turns, and the lady's maid enters carrying the first necessities of the morning. She's already fully dressed for work. Her gown is plain, dark, and practical, with sleeves that will not trail through water or catch against the furniture. Her hair has been pinned securely beneath a modest cap, and an apron protects the front of her dress. Unlike the housemaids who scrub hearths and carry coal, a lady's maid holds a position of unusual trust. She works close to her mistress's body, manages private clothing, hears family confidences, and often becomes familiar with worries that are never spoken in the drawing room. Even now, historians continue to debate how intimate this relationship could become. Some mistresses treated their maids with distant politeness, preserving the rigid boundary between employer and servant. Others formed attachments that lasted for decades. Letters occasionally reveal affection, jealousy, resentment, and loyalty woven together in a bond that was never quite friendship and never merely employment. The maid closes the door behind her without allowing it to click. In one hand she carries a covered jug of warm water, in the other is a small tray holding a cup of tea, perhaps a slice of dry toast, and a folded napkin. Early tea in the bedroom is not universal, but in many comfortable homes it provides a gentle beginning before the more substantial breakfast downstairs. The drink may be weak and lightly sweetened, intended less as a meal than as a quiet signal that the day has begun. She sets the tray upon the bedside table and crosses first to the fireplace. The room has cooled during the night. The faint embers are nearly buried beneath pale ash, and the brass fender is cold to the touch. Kneeling on the hearth rug, the maid opens the grate and uses a small poker to gather the remaining glow. She adds dry wood, twists of paper, and several pieces of coal arranged so that air can pass between them. A servant who lays a fire badly may fill the room with smoke. And domestic manuals offer surprisingly exact instructions on the angle of fuel and the proper width of the draught. Soon, a small flame appears. It travels along the edge of the kindling, catches beneath the coal, and begins to strengthen. The maid remains beside it until she's satisfied that it will not fail. Only then does she rise and brush a little soot from her apron. A Victorian bedroom depends heavily upon such small acts. There is no hidden furnace warming every corner of the house. Even where central heating systems exist, they remain uncommon and imperfect. Comfort is created room by room, fire by fire, each one needing fuel, attention, and patient labour. The maid now approaches the windows. The curtains are heavy, perhaps lined with wool for winter, and she draws them apart gradually rather than allowing the morning to enter all at once. A narrow strip of grey light appears between them. Beyond the glass, the garden is wet with mist. Bare branches stand against the sky, and a gardener moves somewhere near the wall, only partly visible through the haze. The shutters are opened next. Their hinges give a faint groan despite regular oiling. Cold light spreads across the carpet, revealing the carved washstand, the dressing table crowded with brushes and bottles, and the chair upon which the lady's dressing gown was carefully arranged the night before. The mistress shifts beneath the blankets. "Good morning, ma'am," the maid says quietly. There is no need for long conversation. Both women understand the order of the ritual. The maid may mention the weather, the hour, or the first appointment of the day. Rain is expected before noon. The carriage has been requested at 11. A note arrived late the previous evening and waits upon the writing desk. Such information is offered gently, allowing the waking mind to return little by little. A lady who has slept poorly might ask for the curtains to be closed again. She may complain of a headache, request smelling salts, or remain in bed while tea is poured. The Victorians often interpret fatigue through ideas of nerves, circulation, digestion, and feminine delicacy. A restless night might be blamed upon rich food, stale air, emotional excitement, or the position of the moon. No one can quite agree whether such beliefs were sincerely medical, socially convenient, or some mixture of both. The maid places the warm water in the porcelain basin. Steam curls upward and briefly clouds the small mirror above the washstand. The basin and matching jug may be decorated with flowers, ivy leaves, or blue pastoral scenes. Beside them lie folded cloths, a dish of soap, and a covered container for used water. She checks the temperature with her fingers. Too hot would be uncomfortable. Too cold would reflect poorly upon the servants below stairs. In winter, carrying water from kitchen to bedroom is an exhausting task. By the time a maid reaches the upper floor, the water may already have cooled, especially in a large house filled with draughty passages. Some households use special hot water cans with fitted lids to preserve heat. Others wrap vessels in cloth. The simple luxury of warm water therefore depends upon cooperation between kitchen servants, housemaids, and the personal maid who delivers it. The lady experiences only the final basin, steaming quietly in its painted stand. While her mistress drinks tea, the maid begins to restore order to the room. She lifts the candle snuffer from the table, removes the burned end of the wick, and gathers any wax that has fallen into the holder. Candles remain expensive enough that fragments are sometimes saved. In thrifty households, leftover grease and candle ends may be melted together, though the resulting light is smoky and unpleasant. She turns back the bedclothes, straightens the slippers beside the rug, and retrieves a book that has slipped beneath the chair. Perhaps it is a devotional volume, a novel borrowed from a circulating library, or a household guide marked with scraps of paper. What a woman reads in private may differ considerably from what she displays in the family library. The maid also empties the bedroom's less elegant necessities. The chamber pot is removed discreetly, covered before it is carried away. Victorian respectability does not eliminate bodily needs, it simply surrounds them with furniture, fabric, and silence. Commode cabinets are designed to resemble ordinary cupboards, concealing their purpose from casual view. In some homes, a small quantity of disinfecting powder is sprinkled into such vessels. Chloride of lime, vinegar, or aromatic herbs may be used to reduce odours. Before the causes of infection are fully understood, strong smells are often treated as dangers in themselves. Fresh lavender, camphor, and eucalyptus are valued not only for fragrance, but for their supposed ability to cleanse unhealthy air. The lady finishes her tea and places the cup upon its saucer. The maid approaches with the dressing gown, a soft garment of wool, quilted silk, or printed cotton depending upon season and wealth. She holds it open while her mistress rises carefully from the bed. The first touch of the floor is cold even through stockings or slippers. The fire has begun to warm the air, but the chill still lingers near the windows and beneath the furniture. The woman slips her arms into the gown and draws it close at the throat. For a moment she stands beside the bed, not yet dressed for the household and no longer hidden in sleep. Her hair is loose, her face unpowdered, and her posture free from the formal control expected later in the day. Only the maid is permitted to see this unfinished version of her. Outside, the mist is thinning. A carriage passes along the road, its wheels whispering over damp stones. Somewhere below, a door closes, a kettle whistles, and the breakfast room fire is stirred into life. The house is no longer sleeping, though it has not yet become public. The maid lifts the warm basin cloth and lays out the soap. The private morning has truly begun. For several quiet minutes, the lady remains beside the bed, wrapped in her dressing gown while the room slowly changes around her. What had seemed shadowy and uncertain moments before is now becoming visible in the grey morning light. The carved edges of the wardrobe emerge from darkness. The floral pattern of the wallpaper returns. A silver-backed brush catches the glow from the window, and the glass bottles upon the dressing table begin to shine faintly, each one holding its own pale colour. Rose water, lavender scent, hair oil, or a medicinal preparation whose label has been written in a careful hand. The bed behind her still holds the shape of sleep. Its curtains hang in deep folds, protecting the mattress from drafts and giving the sleeping space the feeling of a room within a room. Four-poster beds had existed for centuries, and in older manor houses their design still carried something of the medieval chamber, when heavy hangings offered privacy in rooms that might be shared by attendants, children, or travelling guests. By the Victorian period, a wealthy lady usually enjoyed far greater seclusion. Yet the curtains remained useful. Decorative and reassuring. Some households believed that closing the bed curtains too tightly was unhealthy because the sleeper might breathe the same air throughout the night. Others insisted that an open bed invited cold currents, chest complaints, and rheumatic pains. No one can quite agree how consistently such advice was followed. Victorian homes were filled with rules about ventilation, but they were also filled with people who preferred not to wake beneath a stream of icy air. The lady's maid begins drawing back the bed curtains and securing them with braided cords. She works methodically, lifting the folds so that they do not drag across the floor. The sheets will be aired before the bed is remade. In many households, it is considered unwise to cover a bed immediately after someone rises, for warmth and moisture are thought to encourage stale smells and unhealthy vapours. The upper sheet is folded back. The pillows are turned and gently beaten. Feather pillows must be shaken regularly or they lose their shape, flattening into uncomfortable hollows. Some are filled with goose down, while less expensive ones contain coarser feathers that may prick through the ticking. Wool mattresses can become uneven, and horsehair mattresses, though firmer, may rustle whenever the sleeper moves. A mattress might be turned several times a year, a task requiring 2 servants and considerable patience. Beneath it, the ropes or metal supports of the bed must occasionally be tightened. The old expression about sleeping tightly had once referred quite literally to the tension of bed ropes, although historians continue to debate how widely that explanation truly applied. The lady watches without appearing to watch. A servant's labour is expected to remain at the edge of attention, visible enough to be directed but quiet enough not to disturb. Yet in these early moments, before the corset, the arranged hair, and the formal dress, the boundary between the two women feels less rigid than it will downstairs. The maid asks whether her mistress slept well. The answer may be simple. Perhaps she did. Perhaps the wind moved along the chimney during the night, causing the fire to sigh and the curtain rings to tremble. Perhaps a carriage returned late from a neighbouring house, its wheels sounding loudly in the empty street. Perhaps she awoke when the church clock struck 3 and lay listening afterward, unable to judge whether minutes or hours had passed. Victorian bedrooms are full of small nighttime noises, timber contracts in the cold, water pipes knock inside walls, mice stir behind panelling despite the household cat's best efforts. A servant crosses a distant passage carrying a candle shielded by one hand. In a country house, an owl may call from the trees, while rain taps softly against tall windows. People attach meaning to these sounds. A sudden crack in the furniture might be dismissed as harmless settling, but in more superstitious minds it could suggest a warning. A dog howling after midnight, a candle flame burning blue, or 3 unexplained knocks might be remembered uneasily. Such beliefs are not always spoken in educated company, yet old customs survive beneath modern manners. A sprig of lavender placed near the pillow is thought to encourage calm sleep. Some women keep a small Bible or prayer book beside the bed. Others place a sachet of dried hops beneath the pillow as a remedy for sleeplessness. In earlier centuries, people had used charms, saintly objects, or herbs gathered on particular feast days. The Victorian household might consider itself more scientific, but it still preserves many remedies whose roots stretch back toward village healers, manor kitchens, and monastic herb gardens. The lady moves toward the window and rests one hand upon the curtain. The glass is cold. A faint patch of condensation has formed near the lower pane, and beyond it the garden appears washed in silver. The lawn is marked by dew. A gravel path curves between clipped shrubs, while farther away a line of bare trees disappears into mist. In a London house, the view might instead reveal chimney pots, neighbouring roofs, and the first dark figures moving along the street. A delivery boy carries a basket. A maid shakes a cloth from an upper window. A lamplighter, having completed his night's work, walks home beneath lamps that are fading uselessly in the growing light. The morning is not yet noisy. There are no crowded pavements, no loud tradesmen calling their goods, and no stream of visitors arriving at the front door. The private city is visible for a little while before the social city awakens. The lady may ask what the weather promises. Her maid reports that the sky looks unsettled. The gardener believes rain will come before midday, though the barometer in the hall has risen slightly. Weather prediction in the 19th century rests upon instruments, observation, and inherited belief in nearly equal measure. A red morning sky is treated with suspicion. Swallows flying low are said to predict rain. Aching joints, curling leaves, and smoke refusing to rise cleanly from chimneys are all read as signs. Some observers keep detailed weather journals recording wind direction, temperature, cloud, and rainfall. Others trust the kitchen cat, which is believed to wash behind its ears before a storm. Even in a household proud of modern knowledge, the cat may receive more attention than the barometer. The maid opens the window a narrow distance to admit fresh air. The gap is small, but the effect is immediate. Coolness enters the room, carrying the damp scent of earth and coal smoke. The fire responds with a brighter flicker. Fresh air occupies a curious place in Victorian thinking. It is praised as a source of health, yet feared when it moves too sharply through a room. Drafts are blamed for colds, neuralgia, stiff necks, and sudden illness. Bed curtains, door screens, thick rugs, and upholstered furniture all serve partly as defences against invisible currents. The lady draws her dressing gown more closely around herself. Her slippers make almost no sound upon the carpet, though beneath it lie polished boards that would feel bitterly cold in winter. In older houses, rush matting may still appear in passages or servants' rooms, a distant descendant of the rushes once spread over floors in medieval halls. The Victorian carpet is softer, warmer, and more respectable, but it also traps soot, dust, and the fine ash produced by countless coal fires. The maid bends to inspect the hearth. The flames are steady now, casting amber light across the brass fender and softening the grey daylight. Fire and morning meet in the centre of the room, one warm and intimate, the other pale and impersonal. On the bedside table, the tea has left a faint ring of steam upon the polished wood. The cup is nearly empty. A few crumbs remain beside the toast plate, Such early refreshments are often taken quietly, before appetite has fully returned. The proper breakfast will come later with its silver covers, folded napkins, toast rack, eggs, and carefully arranged conversation. For now, the lady is still within the most private part of her day. She has not yet become the hostess, wife, mother, employer, or figure of social respectability recognized by everyone else. She's simply a woman standing in a cold room after sleep, listening to the muted sounds of the house awakening around her. Below stairs, coal is shoveled into another grate. A bell rings once and stops. Footsteps pass along the back corridor. Somewhere outside, rain begins very lightly, touching the window in scattered drops. The maid closes the window again and turns toward the washstand. The curtains are open, the bed is airing, and the darkness of the night has finally withdrawn from the room. The lady takes one last glance toward the misty garden, before beginning the careful work of preparing herself for the day. The washstand waits near the window, its white porcelain basin filled with water that still gives off a faint thread of steam. Beside it stands the matching ewer, broad at the base and curved at the handle, painted with small blue flowers that repeat along the rim of the basin. A folded linen cloth lies beside a cake of soap, while below the stand, hidden behind a narrow door, there is space for the slop jar into which the used water will later be poured. The arrangement is elegant, but is also a reminder of how much effort lies behind an ordinary Victorian morning. Water does not simply arrive through a silver tap. It has been pumped, heated, lifted, carried through passages, and delivered by hand. In a large country house, the journey from kitchen range to upper bedroom may pass through several doors and up more than one staircase. By the time the jug reaches its destination, the servant carrying it may have warm arms and cold feet. The lady loosens the cord of her dressing gown and draws closer to the basin. Her maid remains nearby, ready to hand her a cloth or adjust the temperature, but the washing itself may be partly private. Customs differ from household to household. Some women expect close assistance, while others prefer their maid to turn away or busy herself at the wardrobe. No one can quite agree how thoroughly the average respectable Victorian woman washed each morning. Advice manuals frequently recommend cleanliness, yet their instructions often describe a careful washing of the face, neck, hands, arms, and upper body rather than immersion in a full bath. Water is precious, rooms are cold, and filling a large bath requires heavy labour. The modern idea of stepping beneath a warm shower each morning belongs to another age. She dips the cloth into the basin and presses it first against her face. The water is pleasantly warm, though not hot enough to redden the skin. She wipes gently around her eyes, across her forehead, and along her cheeks, removing the warmth of sleep and the faint residue of last evening's powder or cream. The soap is mild by the standards of the time, perhaps made with olive oil, almond oil, or rendered animal fat scented with rosehue violet or lavender. Fine toilet soaps are costly, and advertisements promise softness, purity, and a clear complexion. Less expensive household soap can be harsh enough to roughen the hands, which is one reason servants' skin so often reveals the work they perform. Some ladies avoid ordinary soap upon the face entirely. They believe it dries the complexion and encourages early lines. Instead, they may use oatmeal water, milk, rose water, elderflower wash, or a preparation sold by a fashionable perfumer. Recipes circulate between mothers and daughters, written into household notebooks beside remedies for coughs, stains, burns, and sleeplessness. A simple complexion wash might contain rainwater and crushed herbs. Another may include honey, wax, glycerin, or cucumber. More questionable preparations promise to remove freckles, pallor, redness, or signs of age. Their ingredients are not always listed, and some conceal lead, mercury, arsenic, or other substances far more dangerous than the blemishes they claim to cure. The lady rinses the cloth and washes behind her ears and along her neck. These areas matter because her morning dress may reveal part of the throat, while later gowns might expose the shoulders more widely. Cleanliness is therefore connected not only with health, but with presentation. A faint mark near a collar, a roughened hand, or an unpleasant scent might be noticed even when politeness prevents anyone from mentioning it. Her maid offers a smaller towel, warmed briefly near the fire. It feels soft against the damp skin. The lady then slips one arm from the dressing gown and washes from shoulder to wrist, keeping the rest of herself covered against the cold. She repeats the process on the other side. Such partial washing is practical in an unheated room. The fire has strengthened, but warmth gathers unevenly, lingering near the hearth and fading toward the high ceiling. A more complete wash may be performed behind a folding screen. The maid can place a shallow tin bath or broad ceramic basin upon a protective cloth, then bring additional cans of water. Some bedrooms contain a small hip bath, shaped so that the bather sits upright while only part of the body is immersed. It requires less water than a full-length tub and can be carried away after use. Bathing, however, is surrounded by conflicting advice. Some physicians praise cold water as strengthening to the nerves and circulation. Others warn that sudden immersion may weaken delicate constitutions. Warm baths are recommended for relaxation, stiffness, or illness. Yet too much warmth is sometimes thought to encourage laziness or faintness, even now. Historians continue to debate how closely families followed these medical directions rather than simply choosing whatever felt tolerable on a winter morning. In fashionable circles, cold sponging has become a mark of discipline. A woman may wash quickly with water that has stood overnight, enduring the chill because it is said to improve vitality. The same custom is encouraged for men at boarding schools and in military life, where discomfort is often treated as evidence of good character. Yet the private reality is gentler. If the room is freezing and frost has gathered along the window, warm water is unlikely to be refused merely for the sake of principle. The maid now takes up the used cloth and replaces it with a clean one. Towels are not always as large or thick as modern bath towels. They may be narrow lengths of linen, carefully marked with the household initials and counted during the weekly laundry. Each piece belongs to a system of domestic order. Lost linen is investigated, torn linen repaired, and worn linen eventually cut down for polishing cloths, bandages, or kitchen use. The lady washes her hands thoroughly, paying attention to the nails. A small nail brush may be used, followed by a pointed ivory or bone tool to clean beneath each nail. Long painted nails are not admired. The ideal is neatness, pale colour and smooth skin. To keep her hands soft, she may apply glycerin, almond paste, cold cream, or a mixture of honey and oil. Some women sleep in loose gloves after coating their hands with cream. Others wear lemon-scented preparations believed to remove stains and whiten the skin. A lady's hands should suggest that she writes letters, arranges flowers, pours tea, and turns the pages of books, not that she carries coal or scrubs floors. The contrast is visible in the room. Her maid's fingers, though clean, may be reddened from washing garments, handling hot irons, fastening hooks, and working in cold water. The rituals of beauty depend upon other hands bearing the roughness that fashionable hands are expected to avoid. Upon the washstand sits a small covered dish containing tooth powder. The lady takes up a toothbrush with a bone or ivory handle and bristles made from hog hair. Toothbrushes are becoming more common, though not everyone uses them regularly. Some still clean their teeth with cloth, salt, soot, chalk, charcoal, or powdered herbs. Commercial tooth powders may contain chalk, cuttlefish bone, powdered orris root, myrrh, camphor, or bicarbonate of soda. Some abrasive mixtures can damage the enamel. Others are strongly perfumed to sweeten the breath rather than prevent decay. Dentistry is advancing during the century, but toothache remains common, and extraction is often the most certain treatment. Old household beliefs survive beside newer advice. A clove pressed against an aching tooth may offer temporary relief. Oil of cloves is valued for its numbing quality, though the reason for its effectiveness is not yet fully understood. Saltwater rinses, laudanum, warm poultices, and whispered charms also appear in family traditions, especially in villages far from professional dentists. The lady brushes carefully, then rinses her mouth from a small tumbler. She may use a scented mouthwash prepared with mint or cinnamon. The maid discreetly empties the water into the slop jar beneath the stand. Nothing in the ritual is allowed to appear untidy. Used cloths are folded inward, soap dishes are wiped, bottles are returned to their proper places. The basin will soon be removed, washed, dried, and brought back ready for another use. Outside, the rain has become steadier. It moves softly across the glass and darkens the gravel path below. Somewhere in the garden, drops gather on the bare branches and fall one by one into the wet earth. Inside, the coal fire gives a low, even murmur, and the room has taken on the mingled scents of warm linen, lavender soap, and smoke. The lady dries her face once more and studies her reflection in the small mirror. The glass is not perfectly even, and the image shifts slightly near its edges. She sees herself without powder, ribbons, jewellery, or arranged hair, a private face that will soon disappear beneath the careful signs of readiness. The washing is finished, though the preparation of the body has only begun. Bottles of tonic wait upon the dressing table. A hairbrush lies beside a row of combs. In the wardrobe, linen garments hang in pale layers, and the maid is already considering which of them the weather and the morning's duties will require. On the dressing table, among the brushes and stoppered scent bottles, stands a smaller collection of objects that belongs neither entirely to medicine nor entirely to beauty. There is a dark glass vial of smelling salts, a narrow bottle of tonic, a porcelain spoon, and perhaps a folded paper packet sent from the household chemist. Beside them lies a little notebook in which doses, symptoms, and family remedies have been recorded in the same careful handwriting used for menus and visiting lists. The Victorian morning is not considered complete merely because the face and hands are clean. The body must also be interpreted. A pale complexion, a restless night, a dry throat, or a slight heaviness behind the eyes may each be treated as a message from the nerves, the blood, the stomach, or the surrounding air. The lady sits before the dressing table while her maid removes the stopper from a bottle of aromatic salts. Inside is a powerful mixture, often based upon ammonium carbonate and scented with lavender, rose, or another perfume intended to soften its sharpness. The bottle is held briefly beneath the nose, not so close that the fumes become painful, but near enough to cause an immediate breath and a slight watering of the eyes. Smelling salts are associated with fainting ladies in crowded rooms, yet they have a wider place in daily life. They may be used for headache, dizziness, exhaustion, emotional shock, or the vague weakness commonly described as low spirits. A woman might carry a decorative vinaigrette in her pocket or reticule, its pierced inner lid holding a sponge soaked with vinegar and perfume. Such objects can be made from silver, enamel, carved shell, or even gold, turning a practical remedy into a sign of taste. No one can quite agree how often Victorian women truly fainted compared with how often novelists found the event convenient. Tight clothing, overheated rooms, hunger, illness, pregnancy, and emotional strain could certainly cause collapse. At the same time, faintness offered a socially acceptable language for distress in a culture where direct anger or fear might be judged improper. This morning, however, the lady does not feel faint. She takes only one cautious breath from the bottle and gestures for it to be closed. Her maid next pours a small quantity of tonic into the porcelain spoon. It may be iron preparation prescribed for pallor, quinine for recurring fever, or a bitter digestive mixture containing gentian, orange peel, and alcohol. Patent medicines are widely advertised, promising to strengthen the nerves, restore appetite, purify the blood, or correct almost any private discomfort. Some are harmless, some unpleasant, and some contain enough alcohol, opium, or other powerful substances to create new troubles while soothing old ones. The lady tastes the medicine and reaches immediately for water. The bitterness remains at the back of the tongue. Domestic medicine in the 19th century is still practiced largely within the home. A physician may be called for serious illness, but minor complaints are managed by mothers, wives, housekeepers, nurses, and experienced servants. The family medicine cupboard might contain castor oil, laudanum, Epsom salts, camphor, mustard, linseed, senna, rhubarb powder, and rolls of clean bandaged linen. Many of these remedies have older roots. Monastic infirmaries and medieval household books had long recommended herbs such as fennel for digestion, sage for the throat, and lavender for sleeplessness. A Victorian lady may consider her age modern and scientific, yet the warm infusion brought to her room can resemble something prepared centuries earlier beside the herb garden of an abbey, where dried leaves hung from soot-dark rafters and bells divided the day into measured hours. The explanations have changed more quickly than the ingredients. Digestion receives particular attention. A heavy meal the night before may be blamed for disturbed dreams. A coated tongue, or a morning headache. The lady may take a spoonful of mineral water, a mild saline powder, or a cup of hot water with lemon. Some advisors recommend plain toast and weak tea until the stomach settles. Others insist that tea itself weakens the nerves and should be replaced with cocoa, broth, or warm milk, Even now, historians continue to debate how literally people follow the endless advice printed in domestic guides. One manual might praise early rising and cold water, while another warned delicate women against exertion before breakfast. One physician encouraged open windows, another feared damp air. Families selected the recommendations that suited their habits and quietly ignored the rest. The maid crosses to the window and opens it a few inches once more. Fresh air is believed to restore vitality, especially after a night spent behind curtains and closed shutters. The lady stands near the fire rather than directly in the draught, breathing carefully as the cool air enters. Beyond the glass, rain still falls over the garden. It has softened the outlines of the hedges and left the gravel path shining. A rook settles in the bare branches, shakes the water from its wings, and remains there as though waiting for the weather to decide what sort of day it intends to become. The lady takes several slow breaths. Deep breathing is not yet a formal morning exercise in every household, but ideas about posture, air, and circulation are growing fashionable. Women may be advised to raise the arms, expand the chest, or walk briefly in the room before dressing. Gentle calisthenics can be performed with light wooden dumbbells, though vigorous movement is sometimes discouraged for fear that it will appear unfeminine or disturb the reproductive organs. A few stretching movements are considered enough. The lady lifts her arms, rolls her shoulders, and turns her head slowly from side to side. Without the weight of corset and petticoats, her body moves more freely than it will later. Her maid watches discreetly, holding the dressing gown closed at the back when the fabric loosens. Health is often measured through routine. Rising at the same hour, eating modestly, walking daily, avoiding excitement, and keeping the bowels regular are all treated as safeguards against illness. The last of these is discussed in surprisingly direct language inside private manuals, though never at the breakfast table. If the lady has not felt well for several days, she might be given a dose of castor oil or senna tea. The remedies are effective but deeply unpopular. Rhubarb and magnesia are used more gently, while prunes, figs, porridge, and brown bread offer less medicinal assistance. Mineral waters from famous spa towns are bottled and sold to households unable to travel to the springs themselves. There are stranger practices as well. Some women wear magnetic belts, sleep with herbal pads, or purchase electrical devices said to stimulate weak nerves. Others rely upon coloured ribbons, prayer, or small charms inherited from older relatives. A piece of red thread tied around the wrist against rheumatism would seem out of place in a fashionable drawing room. Yet similar beliefs survive quietly in country districts and servants' quarters. The lady's own remedy is simpler. Her maid prepares a cup of warm water infused with a little lemon peel and honey. The scent is clean and faintly sweet. Honey has been used for sore throats since long before the Victorian period, when manor kitchens stored it in glazed pots and village healers mixed it with herbs gathered along hedgerows. She drinks slowly, allowing the warmth to settle. On the table nearby rests a small pulse watch. Some women learn to count their own heartbeat, especially after illness, although medical interpretation remains uncertain. A rapid pulse may suggest fever, nervousness, exertion, or merely anxiety about having a rapid pulse. The line between observation and worry is easily crossed. The maid asks whether the headache from yesterday has returned. It has not. Though there is a slight pressure at the temples, a drop of lavender water is rubbed there with 2 fingers. For stronger pain, the household might use menthol, camphor, vinegar cloths, or a preparation containing laudanum. Opium-based medicines are readily available and appear in remedies for coughs, diarrhea, sleeplessness, and pain. Their dangers are not fully ignored, but they are poorly controlled, and dependence can develop behind respectable doors without attracting notice. The lavender is safer, and its fragrance blends with the soap still lingering in the room. For a few moments, no one speaks. Rain murmurs against the windows. The fire settles deeper into the grate. And somewhere in the distance, a church bell sounds the quarter hour. Its note travels through the wet morning with the same measured calm once heard across medieval fields, when villagers, monks, and travellers used bells rather than watches to understand the passing day. The lady closes her eyes until the final vibration fades. Her remedies have not transformed her. They have simply marked the passage from sleep toward wakefulness. Warm water, sharp salts, bitter tonic, cool air, a little movement, and the reassuring order of familiar objects. The maid replaces each bottle in its proper position, the spoon is wiped, the notebook is closed, health, for now, has been declared sufficient. Upon the dressing table, the hairbrushes wait in a neat silver-backed row. The lady turns towards the mirror and her maid steps behind her, gathering the long, loosened hair that has rested across her shoulders since the night before. The lady settles upon the cushioned stool before the dressing table, and her maid stands behind her with both hands raised toward the loosened hair. During the night, it has been braided or gathered beneath a soft cap to prevent tangling, but sleep has still left its mark. A few strands cling to the neck. Others have escaped across the shoulders, catching the pale light from the window like fine threads of brown, black, auburn, or silver. The maid begins by removing the pins one at a time. Each pin is placed carefully into a shallow tray. Hairpins are small enough to disappear into carpets, seams, and floorboards, and a lost one may later be discovered by a housemaid kneeling beside the bed, or by a stockinged foot at an unfortunate moment. Some are plain wire, others have polished horn, tortoiseshell, jet, or pearl heads, depending upon the style of the woman and the degree of formality required. The final braid is loosened and the hair falls down the lady's back. For many Victorian women, a long hair is closely associated with femininity, health, youth, and respectability. A respectable married woman generally wears it arranged and controlled in public, twisted into coils, loops, braids, or smooth chignons. Loose hair belongs to childhood, illness, sleep, grief, or the privacy of the bedroom. To appear downstairs with it flowing freely would feel as unfinished as appearing without shoes. The maid divides the hair into sections and examines the ends. She's looking for knots, broken strands, dryness, and signs of irritation upon the scalp. A fine-toothed comb may reveal dandruff, dust, or less welcome visitors. Lice are not confined to the poor, though wealth allows more frequent washing, clean linen, and personal attention. Respectable households rarely discuss such matters openly, but fine combs, vinegar rinses, and herbal preparations remain familiar objects in the dressing room. No one can quite agree whether the famous advice to brush the hair 100 strokes each day was truly followed by most women or merely repeated because it sounded disciplined. The number appears in beauty traditions long after the Victorian age, yet the underlying practice is real. Brushing removes loose hair, distributes natural oils, smooths the surface, and gives the maid time to inspect every section. She begins slowly at the ends rather than pulling from the roots. The brush has a polished wooden or silver back and firm natural bristles. Boar bristle is especially valued, though brushes vary greatly in quality. A wealthy lady may own a matching dressing set engraved with her initials brushes, hand mirror, comb, button hook, shoehorn, and small covered boxes arranged symmetrically across the table. The first strokes are short and patient. When the maid encounters a knot, she holds the hair above it with one hand so that the pulling does not reach the scalp. A drop of oil may be rubbed between her fingers. Macassar oil is fashionable, as are preparations made with almond oil, rosemary, bergamot, or bear's grease. Bear's grease has a particularly durable reputation as a treatment for thinning hair. Some sellers claim it encourages growth because the bear itself is a heavily furred animal, a piece of reasoning that sounds persuasive only until examined too closely. Genuine bear fat is difficult to obtain, and many jars probably contain perfumed lard or beef marrow. Even now, historians continue to debate how much of the advertised product ever came near a bear. The oil is used sparingly. Too much would leave the hair heavy and stain collars, pillows, and upholstered chairs. The popularity of oily hair dressings gives rise to the antimacassar, the small washable cloth placed across the backs and arms of chairs to protect the fabric. Its name survives long after many people have forgotten the preparation it was designed to resist. The brush moves upward through the middle lengths. Stroke follows stroke with a soft, dry whisper. The lady studies her reflection while the maid works. The mirror shows only part of the room behind her, the edge of the bed curtains, the fire, and a narrow section of the rain-darkened window. The glass may contain tiny imperfections, making the image ripple slightly when she moves. Morning light is honest but gentle, revealing pale roots, tired eyes, and the faint lines that candlelight in the drawing room might conceal. Hair washing does not usually happen every morning. It is an involved process, particularly when the hair reaches the waist or below. Water must be carried, the room warmed, and the hair dried completely to avoid what many believe to be the dangers of chill. Washing might occur every week, every 2 weeks, or less often, depending upon habit, hair type, and household advice. Some women use soap, while others fear it will make the hair brittle. Egg yolk, bran water, borax, rum, rosemary infusion, and rainwater are all recommended in different guides. A rinse of vinegar may remove residue and leave shine, though the scent must be disguised before the lady receives visitors. Rainwater is valued because it is softer than hardwell water. In older country houses, it may be collected in barrels beneath the eaves, much as water had been gathered for generations in farmyards, abbey gardens, and manor kitchens. The vessel must be covered, however, or leaves, insects, soot, and birds may contribute ingredients no beauty manual intended. The maid pauses to clean the brush. Loose strands have collected among the bristles, and she draws them out with a small comb-like tool known as a brush cleaner. She does not throw the hair into the fire. A lesser-known object on many Victorian dressing tables is the hair receiver, a small covered bowl with a hole in its lid. Loose hair from brushes is pushed through the opening and saved. Over time, the collected strands may be used to fill a tiny cushion, strengthen a hairpiece, create decorative hairwork, or form part of a sentimental keepsake. Hair jewellery is especially associated with mourning. The hair of a deceased relative might be woven into a brooch, bracelet, ring, or framed memorial design. Such objects can appear sombre to modern eyes, but to Victorians they offer something deeply personal, a physical part of someone that does not fade like flowers or vanish like breath. Living hair is also saved. A lady's own combings can be used to create a rat, not the small creature sometimes heard behind the skirting board, but a padded roll placed beneath the hair to give shape and volume. These supports may be made from collected hair, wool, wire, or purchased material. Hidden inside the finished arrangement, they allow wide coils and smooth curves without requiring every strand to perform impossible work. The maid resumes brushing. Outside the bedroom, the household continues to gather momentum. A distant bell rings below stairs. Somewhere in the corridor, a housemaid carries a coal scuttle past the door, and the faint scrape of metal briefly interrupts the quiet. Rain travels along the roof in a soft, unbroken murmur, while the bedroom fire throws a warm flicker across the silver brush. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. The brush descends from crown to ends, lifts and returns. The maid changes sides, smoothing first the right section and then the left. She may count the strokes silently, though perfection matters less than patience. The work can take half an hour when the hair is thick or especially long. Conversation, if it occurs, remains private and restrained. The maid might mention that a ribbon needs replacing or that the weather makes a tighter arrangement sensible. Damp air causes curls to loosen and carefully smoothed hair to rebel. A rainy morning therefore influences fashion before the lady has even looked at her appointments. Heated curling irons may be used later, warmed near the fire and tested against paper before touching the hair. If the paper scorches, the iron is too hot. Careless use can singe the ends or produce the unmistakable smell of burned hair. Rag curls, pins, or braided sections offer safer alternatives, though they require planning the night before. Today, the lady will wear a modest morning style. The maid parts the hair neatly, smoothing the front sections close to the head. The remaining length is twisted at the back and shaped into a low coil. Pins disappear one by one beneath the arrangement. A small pad adds fullness, but nothing should look theatrical in the breakfast room. A decorative comb may be inserted above the coil. For morning, it might be black jet. For an ordinary day, polished tortoiseshell or carved horn is sufficient. Ribbons and flowers are reserved according to age, dress, season, and occasion. Victorian fashion has rules for nearly every visible detail, though those who recorded the rules did not always agree with one another. The maid checks the style from both sides and holds up a second mirror so that her mistress can inspect the back. The lady turns her head slightly. Not a loose strand remains upon her neck. The hair receiver is closed. The brushes are returned to their places. The scattered pins have vanished into the finished arrangement, and the private looseness of sleep has been transformed into composure. Outside, the rain begins to ease. Water drips from the eaves, and somewhere beyond the garden wall, a church bell sounds slowly through the damp air. The lady's hair is now ready for the day, but the body beneath the dressing gown is still wrapped in soft and shapeless cloth. Behind her, The maid opens a drawer and lifts out the first pale linen garments, layer by layer. The morning's about to become more structured. The maid lays the garments across the foot of the bed in the order they will be needed. At first glance, they appear almost weightless pale linen, soft cotton, narrow ribbons, and carefully mended seams. Yet by the time each layer has been fastened into place, the lady's body will be enclosed within a private architecture of cloth, bone, cord, steel, and expectation. The dressing gown is loosened and allowed to fall from the shoulders. Beneath it, the lady still wears the nightdress in which she slept, a long garment of white cotton or linen with a high neck and full sleeves. It offers warmth and modesty rather than elegance. Night clothes are washed frequently, repaired carefully, and sometimes marked with embroidered initials so that they do not become confused with the linen of another family member. The lady lifts her arms while the maid draws the nightdress upward and away. For a brief moment, the morning air touches skin that has been protected by blankets, curtains, and firelight. The chill is immediate, though the room is warmer now than it was at dawn. The first daytime garment is the chemise, sometimes called a shift. It is simple, loose, and usually sleeveless or short-sleeved, falling below the knees. The chemise stands between the skin and every heavier garment that follows. It absorbs perspiration and body oils, protecting gowns and corsets that are far more difficult to wash. This principle is much older than the Victorian era. Medieval men and women had also worn washable linen close to the body beneath woolen outer clothing. In castles, manor houses, and village cottages, the clean shift offered a practical form of cleanliness when full bathing was difficult. The fabric and shape have changed, but the morning logic remains. Familiar linen touches the skin so that costly clothing does not have to. The maid lowers the chemise over her mistress's head and smooths it across the shoulders. The fabric is cool at first, then quickly warms. Its seams are flat to prevent rubbing, and the neckline is edged with a little lace, modest enough not to show beneath the morning dress. Next come the drawers. Women's drawers are still a relatively recent addition to respectable wardrobes during the 19th century. Earlier generations often wore no divided undergarment beneath their petticoats, relying instead upon long shifts and skirts. By the Victorian period, drawers are increasingly common, though their precise form changes with fashion. Many are open at the centre rather than fully joined. This design can surprise modern observers, but it serves a practical purpose once the woman is enclosed in corset and multiple skirts. The two legs are connected only at the waist, allowing bodily needs to be managed without removing the entire arrangement. No one can quite agree when drawers became universal among women of different classes. Fashion plates and surviving garments usually represent those wealthy enough to preserve their clothing, while poorer women left fewer objects behind. Some servants and labourers may have adopted them slowly, especially where extra fabric meant extra expense and laundry. The lady steps into the drawers and holds the waistband while the maid fastens it. They are made from white cotton, perhaps decorated at the hem with tucks or embroidery that no visitor is expected to see. Victorian underclothing is often surprisingly ornamental. Concealed lace and careful stitching are understood as signs of personal refinement, even when the garments remain entirely private. Stockings follow. They are long, reaching above the knee, and may be knitted from cotton, wool, or silk, depending upon season and wealth. Today's weather calls for warmth, so the pair chosen is finely woven wool in a pale colour. The lady sits while the maid gathers one stocking in her hands and guides it over the foot. It is drawn slowly upward to avoid twisting. The second follows. Stockings do not yet depend upon elastic in the modern sense. They are held by garters tied or buckled above or below the knee. Garters carry their own customs and superstitions. A bride may give away pieces of ribbon associated with her garters for good fortune, a practice with roots in much older wedding traditions. Some young women choose particular colours for luck or affection. Such beliefs are usually treated lightly in polite society, yet old meanings cling to intimate objects long after their origins are forgotten. The maid fastens the garters firmly but not tightly enough to leave painful marks. A pair of soft indoor slippers protects the lady's feet while dressing continues. Boots will be selected later if she goes outside. For now, she stands upon the carpet as the maid lifts the corset from a chair. The corset is not the monstrous instrument imagined in every later story, though neither is it a trivial garment. It is made from strong cotton coutil, reinforced with narrow strips of whalebone, steel, or a mixture of both. A rigid busk runs down the front, keeping the body upright, while laces at the back allow the waist to be shaped. Victorian corsets vary greatly. Some are short and flexible, others are long, heavily boned, and designed to create the fashionable silhouette of a particular decade. Girls may begin wearing lightly structured stays before adulthood, gradually becoming accustomed to the sensation of support. The chemise is pulled smooth so that no fold will become trapped beneath the corset. A small wrinkle, pressed against the body for hours, can cause irritation. The maid wraps the corset around her mistress and fastens the busk at the front, fitting one metal loop over another with practiced fingers. Then she moves behind her and takes hold of the laces. The lady places both hands lightly against the bedpost. The maid draws the cords inward, first at the upper back, then at the waist, then below. The movement is steady rather than violent. She pauses between adjustments, allowing the body to settle inside the garment. Tight lacing exists, and some women pursue extremely narrow waists, encouraged by fashion illustrations that exaggerate the human form. Doctors write stern warnings about compressed ribs, displaced organs, poor digestion, faintness, and difficulty breathing. Satirical artists draw women divided nearly in two. Yet historians continue to debate how widespread extreme tight lacing truly was. Surviving corsets often show moderate measurements, and many women needed enough freedom to walk, manage households, travel, and work. The dramatic waist of a fashion plate could be helped by padded hips, wide skirts, optical contrast, and the illustrator's imagination. The lady asks for a little more room. The maid loosens one section, then retightens it more evenly. A well-fitted corset should feel supportive, not unbearable. It changes posture immediately. The shoulders draw back, the waist becomes firm, and bending from the middle grows more difficult. From now until undressing, the lady will reach, sit, and turn according to the garment's limits. There is one faint creak as a bone settles into place. The corset ends are tied securely, and the long laces are tucked away. Over it comes the corset cover, a thin, sleeveless garment that hides the hard edges and protects the dress from rubbing. Its neckline is decorated with narrow lace, and small buttons run down the front. The maid smooths it over the shaped torso. Then the petticoats begin. The first is narrow and plain, worn close to the body. Another may be flannel for warmth. Winter petticoats can be red, a colour sometimes thought beneficial to health. Red flannel is recommended for rheumatism, weak circulation, and protection against cold. Though no one can quite agree whether the colour itself was believed to hold power or merely made the material seem warmer. A quilted petticoat adds insulation around the hips. Its stitched fabric holds thin layers of wool, creating warmth without excessive weight. In grand houses, where corridors remain cold despite fires in the main rooms, such hidden protection is valuable. The silhouette depends upon the year. In the Middle Victorian decades, a crinoline cage might support the skirts. Earlier, several heavy petticoats create volume. Later, bustles move the fullness toward the back. Today, the maid selects a modest hoop structure suited to a morning dress rather than an evening gown. The cage unfolds around the lady like the frame of a bell. Flexible steel hoops are connected by vertical tapes, allowing the structure to sway and compress slightly when she sits or passes through a doorway. The crinoline frees women from wearing numerous heavy petticoats, but it introduces new difficulties. It can catch on furniture, lift unexpectedly in strong wind, and swing dangerously near an open fire. Domestic manuals repeatedly warn women to keep their skirts away from grates. Fires caused by clothing are a serious danger in homes illuminated by candles and heated by coal. A spark can catch muslin or cotton before the wearer understands what has happened. Fire guards, heavy woolen fabrics, and caution offer protection, but accidents still occur behind respectable doors. The maid adds one final petticoat over the cage. It softens the outline of the hoops and prevents them from showing through the gown. The fabric falls in broad folds, transforming the private framework into a smooth shape. The lady takes several steps across the room to test the arrangement. The cage shifts quietly around her legs. The corset holds her spine straight. The many layers create warmth, though they also distance her body from the world around it. Outside, water continues to drip from the roof after the passing rain. The morning bell of a nearby church sounds across the wet streets, its slow notes fading between the houses. In the bedroom, The fire gives a gentle glow, reflected in the polished wardrobe door and the small silver fittings of the dressing table. The garments no visitor will see are now in place. Chemise, drawers, stockings, garters, corset, cover, petticoats, and steel hoops have prepared the figure upon which respectability will be displayed. The maid opens the wardrobe. Within hangs several morning gowns in subdued colours, each chosen not merely for beauty but for weather, age, duty, and the complicated language of Victorian dress. Inside the wardrobe, the morning gowns hang in a quiet row, their colours softened by the dim light and the protection of linen covers. None possesses the brilliance of an evening dress intended for a ballroom or formal dinner. These garments belong to the private and semi-public hours of the day, when a lady may breakfast with family, speak with servants, write letters, receive an intimate caller, or walk briefly in the garden without yet presenting herself to the wider social world. The maid draws one gown forward and studies it against the morning light. It is made from wool and silk in a muted shade of moss green, suitable for the wet weather outside. The bodice is fitted but not severe, the sleeves narrow at the shoulder before widening gently toward the wrist, and the skirt is full enough to fall smoothly over the supporting hoops beneath. Small black buttons run down the front, while darker braid follows the edges of the cuffs and collar. A morning gown is expected to appear modest, practical, and composed. It should not suggest that its wearer has dressed for admiration too early in the day. Pale muslins, soft wools, printed cottons, and dark silks all have their place, depending upon season, income, age, and the degree of formality within the household. No one can quite agree how strictly women followed every rule printed in fashion journals. The magazines speak confidently, declaring that certain colours are too youthful, certain trims too bold, and certain sleeves entirely unsuitable before a luncheon. Real women, however, wore what they owned, what could be altered, and what had survived the previous season without becoming hopelessly unfashionable. The lady considers the green gown, then glances toward the window. The rain has stopped, but the garden remains dark and wet. A lighter dress might be marked by damp hems if she walks outside. A silk gown would be unnecessarily formal for household business. The wool mixture therefore seems sensible. The maid removes it from the hanger and checks the skirt for loose threads or dust. Garments stored in wardrobes are brushed before wearing, especially in houses where coal soot finds its way into every room. A clothes brush with firm bristles removes surface dust, while a small whisk deals with lint caught in the folds. Victorian clothing is rarely treated as disposable. A good gown may be altered repeatedly as fashion changes. Sleeves are narrowed or widened, trim is removed and replaced. A skirt is turned so that the less faded side faces outward. Fabric from an outdated dress may become a child's garment, a servant's Sunday bodice, a quilted petticoat, or decorative cushions. The maid examines the hem and finds a small section of braid beginning to loosen. She takes a needle from a case and repairs it with 3 quick stitches. Such maintenance is part of her daily responsibility. A lady's wardrobe represents a considerable investment, and the servant entrusted with it must understand fabric, stains, repairs, packing, storage, and the dangers posed by damp, moths, perfume, candle wax, and careless folding. Cedar chests and camphor are used to discourage insects. Lavender sachets scent drawers and are also believed to protect linen. In country households, dried herbs may be placed among clothing according to recipes handed down through generations. Southernwood, tansy, rosemary, and wormwood all appear in older domestic traditions, their strong scents associated with both cleanliness and protection. The green gown opens at the front, allowing it to be put on without disturbing the finished hair. The maid holds it wide while the lady steps carefully into the skirt and threads her arms through the sleeves. The fabric settles around the hidden structure beneath. For a moment, the folds catch awkwardly upon the hoops. The maid shakes the skirt gently and smooths it downward until the weight is evenly distributed. She then begins fastening the bodice. Hooks and eyes are common, though buttons may conceal them. The closures are small and numerous, requiring nimble fingers. Some dresses fasten at the back, making assistance unavoidable. The idea that a wealthy Victorian woman might dress entirely alone is therefore unrealistic. Not because she lacks ability, but because the clothing itself has been designed around help. The maid works from the waist upward, Checking that the bodice lies smoothly over the corset cover, a crease beneath the arm is adjusted, the collar is straightened, the sleeves are pulled gently so that the seams align with the shoulders. The lady watches the transformation in the mirror. Only a short while ago, she stood wrapped in a loose dressing gown, her hair unbound and her face still marked by sleep. Now the silhouette is clear and controlled. The waist appears narrower because the skirt spreads outward below it. The shoulders look upright. The dark braid along the bodice draws the eye inward, creating structure without excessive decoration. Dress is a language understood by those trained to read it. The quality of the fabric suggests wealth. The modest trim implies good judgment. The subdued colour announces morning rather than evening. The clean cuffs and collar indicate household order. Even a woman who claims little interest in fashion communicates through every choice she makes. Age influences those choices. A young unmarried woman may wear lighter shades, softer fabrics, and more delicate details. A married woman has greater freedom in some matters, but is expected to avoid anything considered childish. An older widow in full mourning may be restricted to black crepe, dull silk, and ornaments of jet. Mourning customs are among the most complicated rules of Victorian dress. The required fabrics, jewellery, veils, and duration of mourning vary according to the relationship with the deceased. A widow may wear deep mourning for a long period, gradually introducing softer materials and shades of grey, lavender, or mauve as time passes. Some families follow these customs with great care. Others shorten the period for practical reasons or continue wearing black because it is economical. Historians continue to debate how much mourning dress reflected genuine grief and how much it served as a visible social duty. The two were often impossible to separate. This morning, the lady is not in mourning. Though a narrow black ribbon at her collar may commemorate a relative lost the previous year, sentiment can remain in small details long after formal obligations have ended. The maid selects a detachable white collar from a drawer. Detachable collars and cuffs are valuable because they can be washed separately from the dress. The fabric is linen or fine cotton, lightly starched so that it remains crisp but not rigid. Laundry work gives these pieces their brightness, though too much starch can make them uncomfortable against the skin. A small brooch fastens the collar at the throat. It may contain enamel, a miniature portrait, a lock of hair, or a polished stone. The choice is modest enough for breakfast. Diamonds would be absurdly formal at this hour, and even pearls might seem unnecessary unless visitors are expected. The maid next considers whether the lady should wear a cap indoors. Married women, especially in earlier Victorian decades, often wear small lace caps in the morning or at home. The style varies from practical to highly decorative. Younger women gradually abandon them as fashion changes, while older women retain the habit. A white lace cap with narrow ribbons is held briefly above the finished hairstyle. The lady studies the effect in the mirror and decides against it. The morning is informal, and no elderly relatives are expected at breakfast to judge the absence. A belt is fastened around the waist. It is made from matching fabric and secured with a small metal buckle. The maid checks that it lies level, then steps back. The overall appearance is almost complete, but there remain practical questions. Will the lady walk outside before lunch, and if so, the hem must be protected. A separate skirt protector or dust ruffle can be attached beneath the gown, absorbing mud and dirt that would otherwise stain the expensive fabric. On very wet days, the skirt may be lifted slightly with one hand or secured by a dress lifter, a small device that gathers fabric away from the ground. Streets are unforgiving. Even fashionable neighbourhoods contain mud, horse manure, coal dust, puddles, and refuse. Country paths bring their own troubles: wet grass, clay soil, and fallen leaves. A lady may appear to glide calmly through such a world, but beneath the visible elegance she is constantly calculating where to place her boots and how high she may lift her skirt without seeming improper. The maid therefore pins a narrow protective guard inside the hem. She then chooses a pair of indoor shoes with low heels and buttoned sides. They are softer than outdoor boots and made from dark leather suited to the gown. The lady sits while the maid guides them onto her feet and fastens the tiny buttons with a button hook. The tool is slender, with a small curved metal end that catches each button and draws it through its tight opening. Without it, dressing would take longer and strain the fingers. Button hooks appear in silver dressing sets, travelling cases, and ordinary work boxes, a small object made necessary by fashion's love of narrow closures. The lady rises and takes several steps. The gown moves smoothly over the hoops. The shoes are comfortable. The collar does not pinch. She turns once before the mirror, checking the side view and then the back with the help of a second glass held by her maid. Outside, water falls slowly from the branches and the clouds begin to thin. A church bell sounds beyond the houses, answered faintly by another farther away. The notes travel through the cool air as they might once have travelled across old market squares and winter fields, marking a morning already well advanced. The maid makes one final adjustment to the cuff. The lady is now dressed not for spectacle, but for duty. She can enter the breakfast room, speak with the housekeeper, open correspondence, and receive those permitted into the quieter hours of the household. Her gown is restrained, yet every seam announces readiness. Upon the dressing table, powders and scent bottles remain unopened. The structure of the morning is in place, but the finishing touches of complexion, fragrance, and polished appearance still wait in the soft light beside the mirror. The dressing table now becomes the centre of the room. Its polished surface holds more objects than might be noticed at first glance. There are cut glass bottles with silver stoppers, small porcelain jars, folded powder papers, a shallow dish of pins, a hand mirror, a soft puff, and several brushes designed for purposes so delicate that they would seem unnecessary anywhere beyond the private world of the bedroom. Morning light passes through the bottles and leaves faint patches of colour upon the wood, amber from hair oil, pale green from scented water, and soft gold from a preparation whose ingredients are known only to the perfumer who sold it. The lady sits again while her maid fastens a clean linen cover around her shoulders. The gown is already in place, and no powder or cream must fall upon its dark green fabric. Victorian ideals of beauty praise a complexion that appears naturally clear, smooth, and untouched by artifice. Cosmetics are used, but respectable women are expected to conceal the fact. Visible paint is associated with actresses, courtesans, and women considered socially daring. A lady may improve her face, but she must never appear to have constructed it. This creates a quiet contradiction. The less noticeable the cosmetic, the more successful it is judged to be. The maid begins with a small amount of cold cream. The preparation may contain beeswax, almond oil, rose water, and a little borax, blended into a pale ointment that softens dry skin. Its name does not necessarily mean that it has been kept cold. It refers instead to the cooling sensation produced as the water evaporates. A trace is rubbed between the maid's fingertips and pressed gently across the lady's cheeks and forehead. Coal fires dry the air near the hearth, while winter wind and repeated washing can leave the skin rough. Cold cream offers a relief and may also remove any lingering dirt that warm water has missed. Similar ointments have existed for centuries. Medieval household remedies combined animal fat, wax, herbs, and flower waters for chapped hands and weathered faces. Monastic gardens supplied roses, lavender, marigold, and rosemary, while manor still rooms turned petals and roots into waters, salves, and syrups. The Victorian jar is more elegantly labelled, but some of its contents would have been familiar in a much older chamber lit by beeswax candles. The maid wipes away the excess with a soft cloth. Next comes face powder. Rice powder is considered refined, though starch, chalk, zinc compounds, and finely ground minerals also appear in commercial products. The lady closes her eyes while the maid touches a small puff to the surface of the powder and taps away the surplus. Only a thin layer is applied. It softens shine along the forehead and nose and evens the complexion without creating an obvious mask. Powder sometimes gathers at the edges of the eyebrows or near the hairline, so the maid blends it carefully with a fine brush. A little may also be used upon the neck, where the white collar makes any difference in tone more noticeable. Paleness remains fashionable among women who wish to demonstrate that they do not labour outdoors. A fair complexion suggests shelter, leisure, and freedom from the sun. Yet complete pallor can also suggest poor health. The admired face must therefore appear delicate but not lifeless, sheltered but not sickly. Some women attempt to preserve whiteness with veils, parasols, wide bonnets, and lotions intended to remove freckles or tanning. Lemon juice, buttermilk, elderflower water, cucumber, and vinegar are among the milder ingredients. Stronger preparations may contain corrosive substances that irritate the skin while promising to purify it. The most dangerous cosmetics contain lead mercury or arsenic. Lead-based powders can produce a smooth white appearance, but prolonged use may cause skin damage, weakness, stomach pain, and serious illness. Arsenic is sold in wafers and tonics intended to improve the complexion from within. The dosage may be small, yet the belief that poison can create beauty is one of the darker contradictions hidden inside the elegant dressing room. No one can quite agree how many respectable women knowingly use such substances. Advertisements often disguised ingredients behind graceful names, and some customers may never have understood what their creams contained. Others accepted the risk because the pressure to appear youthful and unblemished was strong. The lady's own powder is plain and lightly scented. Her maid has tested it before, and no redness followed. This is considered reassurance enough. A narrow stick of tinted pomade lies in a covered case, but it is used sparingly. The maid touches a little colour to one fingertip and blends it along the lady's cheeks. The effect is almost invisible, suggesting the natural flush that might follow a walk in cool air. Beetroot, carmine made from cochineal insects, safflower, red sandalwood, and coloured wax can all provide rouge. Women who distrust prepared cosmetics may pinch their cheeks or bite their lips before entering a room. The result is temporary, but it preserves the comforting idea that no paint has been used. The lady's lips are treated with a salve of wax and almond oil. A trace of rose colouring gives them warmth without gloss. Cracked lips are common in cold houses, and lip salves are valued as much for comfort as for appearance. Her eyebrows require little attention. A tiny brush smooths them into place. Some women darken brows and lashes with burnt cloves, soot, lamp black, or preparations sold under exotic names. Belladonna drops are sometimes used to enlarge the pupils and make the eyes appear bright, though they can blur vision, increase sensitivity to light, and cause poisoning. Beauty advice frequently rests upon dangerous misunderstandings. A luminous eye, a narrow waist, a pale face, and a calm expression are admired without much concern for the physical cost of producing them. The lady leans closer to the mirror. The result is restrained. Her complexion appears even, her cheeks gently coloured, her lips protected from the cold. Nothing suggests theatrical paint. The face looks simply rested, though the rest has required warm water, cream, powder, tint, skilled hands, and careful light. Scent comes last. Perfume is not poured heavily over the body. A strong fragrance might suggest an attempt to disguise poor cleanliness. Instead, the maid places a few drops of lavender water upon a handkerchief and touches a little cologne behind the lady's ears and at the wrists. Victorian perfumery offers rose, violet, jasmine, orange blossom, verbena, heliotrope, and countless blended scents. Musk and ambergris lend depth, while citrus oils give brightness. Wealthy customers may order personal mixtures from fashionable shops, carrying the same fragrance in scent bottles, soaps, hair oils, sachets, and gloves. Gloves are sometimes perfumed by storing them with aromatic powders or treating the leather with scented oils. Handkerchiefs may be kept among dried lavender. Wardrobes contain sachets of rose petals and orris root, giving clothing a faint fragrance that emerges only when the fabric moves. Perfume also serves as protection in an age still influenced by the belief that disease may travel through foul air. Pleasant scents are associated with purity, while rotting or stagnant smells inspire fear. During outbreaks of illness, people carry vinegar, camphor, herbs, or aromatic pastilles, hoping strong fragrance might defend the body from invisible danger. The germ theory of disease is developing during the Victorian era, but older ideas do not disappear at once. Miasma, the belief that sickness arises from poisoned air, continues to shape habits. Public health campaigns and private anxieties. A clean-smelling room feels safer, even when the fragrance does nothing to remove the true cause of infection. The maid lifts a small silver vinaigrette and checks that its inner sponge remains moist. The lady may carry it later in her pocket, especially if she expects to enter a crowded shop, carriage, or church. Its sharp vinegar scent can revive the senses when the air feels close. A final inspection follows. The maid brushes a trace of powder from the collar and removes one loose strand of hair near the temple. The lady turns her face toward the window, where the natural light reveals anything candlelight might hide. The effect remains soft and believable. Outside, the wet garden has begun to brighten. Water still shines along the bare branches, and a pale strip of sky appears above the rooftops. Somewhere beyond the house, a bell sounds from a stone church, slow and measured, while carriage wheels begin to move more frequently along the road. The dressing table is restored to order, lids are closed, the powder puff is returned to its box, cream jars are wiped at the rim, perfume stoppers are pressed firmly into place so that the costly contents will not evaporate. The lady's face is now ready to be seen. Yet before she enters the breakfast room and takes up the visible duties of the household, there remains a quieter obligation. Near the window stands a small table with a prayer book, a journal, and several pages written in her own hand. The maid steps back, and the room grows still again. Near the window stands a small writing table, quieter in appearance than the crowded dressing table, and more personal than the large desk downstairs. Its surface is covered with dark green leather, worn smooth where hands have rested over the years. Upon it lie a prayer book, a narrow Bible, a silver pencil, several folded sheets of paper, and a journal closed with a faded ribbon. The lady crosses the room and sits. Her maid remains nearby for a moment, gathering the used linen cover and placing the final brushes back into their case. Then, unless immediate assistance is required, she withdraws toward the wardrobe or leaves the room altogether. Private devotion is expected to be private, even when the household depends upon servants for almost every other part of the morning. The lady opens the prayer book to a marked page. For many Victorian women, religion shapes the day in ways both visible and quiet. Sundays bring church attendance, family prayers, charitable visits, and strict expectations about suitable reading or recreation. Weekday devotion is less public, but may be no less important. A woman might begin the morning with a psalm, a short passage from scripture, and a written prayer copied from a devotional guide. The exact practice varies with denomination, family tradition, and personal belief. Some households are Anglican and follow the rhythm of the Book of Common Prayer. Others are Methodist, Baptist, Congregationalist, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic, or connected to smaller religious communities. No one can quite agree how deeply the formal piety described in family memoirs reflected private conviction, social expectation, or a mixture of the two. The lady reads slowly. Her eyes follow the lines while the room settles around her. The coal fire gives a low murmur. Rainwater continues to fall from the eaves in occasional drops, though the shower itself has passed. Beyond the glass, the clouds are lifting above the wet rooftops, and the pale morning has begun to resemble daylight at last. The passage may concern patience, duty, gratitude, or the uncertainty of life. Such themes suit the Victorian domestic ideal, which often places women at the moral centre of the household. A respectable lady is expected not merely to manage servants and receive guests, but to encourage gentleness, restraint, faith, and good conduct among those around her. This expectation could be comforting, burdensome, or both. A woman might find genuine strength in the belief that her daily duties possess spiritual value, yet she might also feel responsible for every failure within the home: a child's disobedience, a servant's dishonesty, a husband's bad temper, or a relative's loss of faith. Domestic guides often assign women immense moral influence while denying them equal public power. The language of submission and duty therefore appears beside evidence of considerable private authority. A lady may not vote or hold formal office, but within the household she can control employment, charitable spending, social invitations, education, and the emotional tone of family life. After reading, she closes her eyes. The prayer is not spoken loudly, perhaps her lips move without sound. She asks for patience in the day ahead, for the health of her children, for a husband travelling on business, or for an elderly parent whose latest letter described a persistent cough. She may remember a servant's sick mother, a tenant family facing winter hardship, or a friend recently widowed. Prayer books often contain pressed flowers, memorial cards, and scraps of writing placed between the pages. A faded violet may mark the passage read on the morning of a wedding. A black-edged card may preserve the name of someone lost years before. These small objects turn the book into a private archive of affection and grief. The custom has older echoes. Medieval devotional books, especially books of hours, had guided wealthy women through prayers marked for different times of day. Their pages might contain painted saints, gilded initials, and scenes of fields, kitchens, castles, or village labour. A Victorian prayer book is usually less ornate, yet the gesture of beginning the morning with measured words links the bedroom to centuries of candlelit chambers, convent cells, and quiet pews. Some women also keep religious mottos near the bed. A framed verse may hang above the washstand, a small cross may stand beside the Bible. In Roman Catholic households, there might be a holy image, rosary beads, or a medal associated with a particular saint. Even in Protestant homes suspicious of saints' relics and old charms, certain objects receive a protective meaning. A Bible placed near a sickbed, a mother's prayer book carried during travel, or a hymn remembered during childbirth may become almost talismanic. Those who recorded such practices rarely described them as superstition, though the boundary between faith, comfort, and inherited custom was not always clear. The lady finishes her prayer and remains seated. This stillness is one of the few moments in her morning that belongs entirely to her. Soon there will be letters requiring answers, menus requiring approval, servants awaiting decisions, and family members bringing requests. Here, for perhaps 10 minutes, no one asks anything. She reaches for the journal. The book is bound in dark leather and fastened with a small brass clasp. Its pages are not necessarily filled with dramatic secrets. Victorian diaries often record weather, health, visits, reading, household concerns, and brief reflections that seem ordinary until many years have passed. She writes the date at the top of a fresh page. The rain ceased after 8, slept poorly. A letter arrived from her sister. The carriage is required before noon. She notes that the gardener believes the frost damaged the early bulbs. The details are simple, yet together they preserve the texture of a life. Some diarists write daily, others return only during illness, travel, bereavement, or emotional uncertainty. A journal may function as a spiritual account, encouraging its writer to examine impatience, vanity, jealousy, or neglect. It may also provide a safe place for thoughts that cannot be expressed in the drawing room. Historians continue to debate how carefully such diaries should be treated as truthful records. Their writers knew that family members might someday read them. Some destroyed pages, softened criticism, or wrote in guarded language. Silence can reveal as much as confession. The lady pauses with the pencil above the paper. She adds one sentence about the morning's unease, though she does not explain it fully. Perhaps a relative's health concerns her. Perhaps an invitation must be declined without causing offence. Perhaps there is simply the low, unshaped melancholy that Victorian physicians might call nervous weakness, and a later age might understand differently. She closes the journal before the feeling can be examined too closely. On the corner of the table rests a small volume of poetry. She opens it at random and reads several lines, not for instruction but for the pleasure of rhythm. Poetry, hymns, sermons, and improving essays are considered suitable. Morning reading. Novels are more controversial, particularly when they are thought emotional, sensational, or morally uncertain. Many women read them anyway. Circulating libraries allow subscribers to borrow fashionable books without purchasing them. A volume may arrive wrapped in paper, carrying faint marks from previous readers. Some families disapprove of novels before breakfast, fearing they encourage idleness or excite the imagination too early in the day. The lady's own book remains closed for now, waiting for a quieter hour. A bell sounds from below stairs. It is not the public front door bell, but one connected to the household's internal system. Somewhere, a servant has been summoned. The sound travels faintly through walls and passages, followed by footsteps moving along the back staircase. The private interval is ending. Sunlight, weak but unmistakable, reaches the wet garden and catches upon the edge of the window glass. The fire has settled into a steady red glow. The bedroom no longer feels like a shelter from night, but a room prepared for departure. The lady places the ribbon between the pages of the prayer book and closes it. The Bible is returned to its place. The journal's clasp clicks softly beneath her fingers. For a moment, she rests one hand upon its cover, then she rises. Her face is composed, her dress smooth, and the thoughts that belong to the quiet table are left behind its closed books. On the larger desk near the door, a pile of letters waits to draw her into the wider life of the household. The larger desk near the bedroom door is less intimate than the small devotional table by the window. It belongs to the practical morning, a place where private thought gives way to obligation. Its drawers hold sealing wax, spare nibs, address books, household bills, and bundles of letters tied with ribbon. A wooden rack separates unanswered correspondence from notes already dealt with, though the distinction is not always as orderly as the lady would prefer. Several envelopes wait upon the blotting paper. One bears the handwriting of her younger sister, another carries the neat address of a local charitable society. A third is smaller, delivered by hand rather than through the post, its corner turned beneath a silver paper knife. Beside them rests a stack of visiting cards collected during the previous week. The lady sits and draws the first letter toward her. Her maid has withdrawn to the dressing room to put away the night clothes and prepare anything that may be needed later. The bedroom door remains closed. Correspondence is private, even when the social world it represents is governed by rules understood by nearly everyone. The sister's letter is opened first. The paper is thin and folded several times to reduce postage. Earlier in the century, postal charges had often depended upon distance and the number of sheets used, making compact writing a matter of economy. The introduction of uniform penny postage transformed communication, allowing letters to travel more cheaply and frequently. By the middle Victorian period, families separated by only a few counties might exchange news several times each week. Some writers even crossed their letters, turning the paper sideways and writing a second set of lines over the first to save space. The result resembles a delicate woven pattern and can be difficult to read. Such cross-writing is becoming less necessary as postage grows cheaper, though thrifty correspondents continue the habit. The lady unfolds the page and begins. Her sister writes of a child recovering from fever, a dinner postponed because of bad roads, and a servant who has unexpectedly given notice. There is concern beneath the calm phrases, though it is expressed indirectly. Victorian letters often rely upon restraint. Illness may be described as indisposition, financial trouble as inconvenience, and serious disagreement as a regrettable misunderstanding. No one can quite agree how accurately such language reflected real emotion. Some families wrote openly and affectionately. Others concealed anxiety beneath formal sentences because the possibility of a letter being misplaced, intercepted, or read aloud was never entirely absent. The lady pauses over the account of the fever. She reaches for a fresh sheet of cream paper and places it squarely before her. The paper bears her address pressed discreetly into the upper corner. Monograms are fashionable, but elaborate decoration would be unnecessary in a family letter. She dips the steel nib into the inkwell. Steel pens are replacing quills in many households, though they can scratch unpleasantly against the paper and occasionally release a blot at the worst possible moment. The ink is dark blue-black, prepared commercially rather than mixed in the house, yet a bottle may still thicken or develop sediment if left too long. The first line is written carefully, "My dearest Clara." She expresses relief that the child is improving and asks several practical questions. Has the fever fully broken? Is the room being aired? Has the physician recommended broth, barley water, or complete rest? She does not offer too much medical advice. To do so might appear interfering, though affection tempts her toward it. The handwriting remains controlled, slanting evenly across the page. Penmanship is considered evidence of education and character. Girls are taught to write clearly, though some develop highly individual hands. A hurried note may be forgiven within a family, but an invitation, condolence, or formal acceptance demands greater care. When the nib gathers too much ink, the lady touches it against the edge of the well. A small sand shaker still stands on the desk, recalling the older practice of sprinkling fine sand over fresh writing to dry it. Blotting paper is now more convenient. She lowers a curved wooden blotter onto the completed lines and lifts it gently. The second letter concerns charity. A committee of local women is collecting blankets, coal tickets, and food for poor families during the cold season. The lady is asked to contribute funds and attend a meeting at the parish room. Such work forms an important part of respectable female public life. Women who possess little formal political authority can still organise schools, visit the sick, distribute clothing, and influence local welfare through churches and charitable societies. The work is rarely simple. Assistants may come with questions about sobriety, church attendance, cleanliness, and moral behaviour. The deserving poor are distinguished from those considered idle or disorderly, though the judgment is often made by people protected from the uncertainty of wages, illness, and rising food prices. The lady knows several of the families named in the appeal. She has seen their cottages beyond the estate wall, where damp gathers around the lower stones and smoke escapes through patched chimneys. She writes that she will provide 2 wool blankets and a quantity of coal. A blanket is a practical gift, but it also carries memories of older forms of charity. Medieval monasteries once distributed bread, ale, clothing, and shelter at their gates, especially on saints' days or during severe weather. Victorian institutions are more bureaucratic, with ledgers, committees, and printed appeals. Yet the cold endured by a family beside an empty hearth has changed very little. The reply is brief and formal. She folds the paper and places it beside an envelope. Adhesive envelopes are common, but some people still distrust their gum or consider wax sealing more secure. For a private family letter, the lady may use a small seal impressed into coloured wax. Black wax suggests mourning. Red is widely used for business and general correspondence. Other colours carry fashionable associations, though the meanings are never entirely consistent. Today she chooses dark blue. A short stick of sealing wax is held near the candle flame until the end softens. The wax drops onto the folded paper, giving off a faint resinous scent. She presses a small engraved seal into it, waits, then lifts it away. The impression shows her initials surrounded by a simple border. The hand-delivered note is opened last. It comes from a neighbour asking whether the lady will be at home later in the morning. The phrase has a precise social meaning. To be at home does not merely mean being physically present inside the house. It announces that callers may be received during a recognised period. A reply must be sent promptly. She writes that she will be pleased to receive the visitor after noon. The wording is warm but not excessive. An invitation to breakfast, a formal dinner, an afternoon call, and a country house visit each require a different tone. Errors can cause confusion or offence, especially when a message appears too familiar, too cold, or uncertain about who is included. Visiting cards create another layer of communication. A caller arriving at the front door presents a card to the servant. Turned corners, folded edges, and handwritten initials can indicate whether the visit was personal, congratulatory, sympathetic, or intended for the whole family. Yet customs vary by decade and neighbourhood, and historians continue to debate whether every elaborate code described in etiquette books was genuinely understood in ordinary life. The lady examines yesterday's cards. One belongs to an elderly widow who called while the family was away. Another bears the names of the married couple. A third was left by a young woman recently returned from the coast. Each requires remembrance, perhaps a return call, an invitation, or a place upon a future guest list. She makes a small note in her engagement book. The front door opens somewhere far below. A servant's footsteps cross the hall, followed by the muted exchange of morning business. Outside, the streets have grown busier, wheels pass over the wet road, and a vendor's distant voice rises briefly before fading between the houses. A church clock strikes the hour. The lady looks toward the window. The rain clouds have broken into pale drifting layers, and a little sunlight rests upon the garden wall. The morning, once enclosed behind bed curtains and a closed bedroom door, is steadily widening. She gathers the finished letters, checks each address, and lays them upon the tray to be taken downstairs. They will pass from maid to footman, from front hall to postbox, and then outward along roads and railway lines toward other rooms, other families, and other quiet mornings. The final envelope is sealed. The desk is not yet empty, but the most urgent words have been sent on their way. The letters remain upon the tray as the lady rises from the desk. Her maid returns at the quiet movement of the chair, checks the fall of the green morning gown, and brushes away one faint thread caught near the cuff. Nothing more is needed upstairs. The fire has warmed the room, the bed is being aired, and the private objects of washing, dressing, prayer, and correspondence have all returned to their proper places. The lady crosses the threshold. Beyond the bedroom lies a corridor softened by carpet and morning shadow. Portraits hang between closed doors, their painted faces emerging gradually as daylight reaches the upper floor. A tall clock stands near the staircase, its pendulum moving behind glass with a slow and dependable swing. The house sounds different outside the bedroom. There are footsteps below, the distant closing of a pantry door, and the faint ring of china being arranged upon a table. Warm air rises from the lower floors, carrying traces of coal smoke, toast, tea, and cooked fish. The lady descends the main staircase while servants use narrower back stairs hidden behind planed doors. The separation allows household work to continue without disturbing the formal appearance of the house. Hot dishes, coal scuttles, cleaning brushes, and laundry baskets move through these concealed passages, while the family walks through halls intended to seem effortless and calm. At the foot of the stairs, a maid passes carrying folded linen. She steps aside, lowers her eyes, and gives a quiet greeting. The lady acknowledges her by name. Remembering servants' names is considered a sign of kindness, though kindness exists within a system where one woman has been dressed and warmed by the labour of many others. The breakfast room door stands partly open. Unlike the formal dining room used for evening meals, the breakfast room is smaller and brighter, often facing east or south to receive the morning sun. Its furniture is less imposing. A round or oval table occupies the centre, surrounded by comfortable chairs rather than the long ranks required for guests. Shelves hold newspapers, family books, and perhaps several small ornaments collected during travel. A fire burns in the grate. The room smells of beeswax polish, fresh bread, and tea. The table has already been prepared with a white cloth, cups and saucers, silver knives, small plates, and folded napkins. A toast rack stands near the teapot, holding thin slices upright so that they remain crisp. Covered dishes preserve the warmth of eggs, bacon, kidneys, fish, or other foods chosen according to the habits of the family. Breakfast in a prosperous Victorian house can be substantial, though not every person eats everything placed before them. The table presents choices rather than a single fixed course. One person may prefer porridge, another eggs, another only tea and toast. A guest accustomed to a lighter meal might find the display overwhelming, while a household that prides itself upon simplicity may offer far less. No one can quite agree how closely ordinary breakfasts resembled the abundant meals described in domestic guides. Surviving menus often represent wealthy families and special occasions. Many middle-class households ate modestly, especially when food prices rose or the cook had little time. Even within rich homes, appetite, illness, economy, and fashion shaped what appeared beneath the silver covers. The lady takes her place near the teapot. Pouring tea is often her responsibility, even when servants have prepared everything else. The act is small but socially meaningful. Tea is expensive, carefully stored, and associated with hospitality. In some earlier households, the mistress kept the tea caddy locked because servants might steal or overuse its valuable contents. By the later Victorian period, tea is more widely available, yet the ritual of the lady pouring remains. The caddy may contain black tea from India, China, or Ceylon, depending upon date and preference. The leaves are measured into the pot, boiling water added, and the brew allowed to stand. Some households warm the teapot first, others insist upon carrying the pot to the kettle rather than the kettle to the pot, declaring that water loses strength during even a short journey. The debates surrounding tea are nearly as elaborate as the drink itself. The lady pours the first cup. Milk may be added before or after the tea. Those who add milk first sometimes claim it protects delicate china from cracking. Others believe the practice reveals inferior manners. Historians continue to debate when such distinctions became socially important and how seriously anyone beyond etiquette writers truly cared. Sugar is offered from a bowl with small tongs. Earlier generations might have cut pieces from a hard sugar loaf using heavy nippers. Refined cubes are now increasingly convenient, though sugar still carries the invisible history of plantations, trade, and labour far beyond the calm breakfast room. Another family member enters, perhaps the lady's husband, already dressed in dark mourning clothes. He brings a folded newspaper and greets her with the restrained warmth of a familiar routine. If children are young, they may eat upstairs in the nursery under the eye of a nurse. Older sons and daughters could join the table, depending upon household custom and the hour. Conversation begins quietly. The weather is mentioned first. The wet garden may prevent a planned walk. The carriage will be required if the roads remain muddy. A letter from a relative is acknowledged without revealing its private details. The tone remains measured, for Victorian advice often warns against disturbing conversation during breakfast, when digestion and temper are thought especially vulnerable. A footman enters carrying a covered dish. He places it upon the sideboard and withdraws almost without sound. The family may serve themselves, or the servant may remain nearby to assist. In less formal homes, a parlour maid performs the same duty, moving between dining room and kitchen with polished dishes balanced carefully in both hands. The lady lifts a silver cover. Beneath it lies kedgeree, A warm mixture of rice, smoked fish, boiled egg, butter, and mild seasoning. The dish has roots in South Asian khichdi but has been transformed within British kitchens, where fish and eggs turn it into a favourite breakfast food. Empire reaches the table in ways the diners may barely consider tea leaves, spices, sugar, rice, and recipes altered through travel and colonial rule. She takes a small portion. Beside the kedgeree are toast, marmalade, and softly boiled eggs. Marmalade, bright and bitter-sweet, is served from a glass dish. Toast cools quickly in its rack, though that is partly the point. Stacked toast traps steam and become soft. Porridge is offered in colder months, sometimes with cream, milk, salt, or sugar. A bowl of stewed fruit may accompany it. Preserves made during summer allow the household to taste berries or plums long after the garden has become bare. The lady eats slowly. Her corset limits how comfortably she can lean forward, so her posture remains upright. The gown spreads around her chair, and the hidden hoops shift when she moves. Breakfast therefore continues the discipline begun upstairs. Every gesture, lifting the cup, unfolding the napkin, reaching for toast, is shaped by clothing, training, and expectation. Table manners are learned early. Knives are not brought carelessly to the mouth. Tea is not blown upon. Cups are lifted without raising the little finger in exaggerated display. Bread is broken rather than bitten from a large piece. Such rules vary over time, but their purpose remains consistent to make the body appear controlled. A servant refills the hot water jug and replaces the coffee pot. Coffee is available, though tea dominates many British households. Cocoa may be preferred by those who consider tea too stimulating. Some physicians warn that strong tea causes trembling, sleeplessness, indigestion, and nervous complaints, particularly in women. The lady continues to drink it anyway. For a few moments the room settles into peaceful silence. Cutlery touches china, the fire gives a gentle crack. Beyond the windows, water shines on the lawn, and pale sunlight passes slowly across the branches. Somewhere farther away, a church bell marks another portion of the morning, its note drifting over wet roofs and stone walls before fading into the ordinary sounds of the street. Breakfast is not merely nourishment. It is the moment when the private woman of the bedroom becomes the visible centre of the household. Here, she learns who has written, what weather has delayed, which guest may call, and what duties await before noon. The last tea is poured, the newspaper is folded, a small crumb is brushed from the tablecloth. Soon the housekeeper will arrive with keys, lists, and questions that no powder, perfume, or graceful morning gown can answer by themselves. The breakfast things have not yet been fully cleared when the housekeeper appears at the door. She does not enter hurriedly. A woman in her position understands that timing is part of authority. She waits until the footman has removed the final covered dish, and until the family's conversation has quieted. Then she steps into the room carrying a ring of keys at her waist, a small account book in one hand, and several folded papers in the other. The keys announce her before she speaks. They are not decorative. Each opens some guarded part of the household: the linen press, the store cupboard, the tea chest, the silver closet, the preserve room, or the cabinet where expensive spices and medicines are kept. In a large house, access is carefully divided. Trust is measured not merely by wages or years of service, but by which doors a servant is permitted to unlock. The lady gestures toward a chair near the window. In very formal households, the housekeeper may remain standing throughout the interview. In others, especially where she has served the family for many years, she may sit with restrained dignity. No one can quite agree how often these morning consultations followed the strict arrangements described in domestic manuals. Real relationships depended upon age, personality, rank, and the invisible history shared between two women who managed the same house from opposite sides of the social boundary. The housekeeper opens her book. The first matter is the day's dinner. The cook has proposed roast mutton, potatoes, stewed celery, and an apple pudding, but the fish delivered that morning is fresher than expected. If the family wishes, it could be served instead, though the mutton would then have to wait until tomorrow. The lady considers the weather, the number of people expected at dinner, and the possibility that the neighbour who wrote earlier may remain longer than planned. She approves the fish for luncheon and keeps the mutton for the evening meal. Such decisions seem small, yet they affect the labour of the entire lower floor. The kitchen maid must clean different utensils. The scullery maid must scrub other pans. Coal consumption changes according to cooking time. Leftovers must be planned so that nothing costly is wasted. A good household menu is therefore not simply a list of dishes, but an arrangement of heat, time, storage, appetite, and servant strength. The housekeeper notes the change in pencil. Next comes the laundry. 2 linen sheets have torn along the centre seam and can no longer be used upon the family beds. They may be cut down for servants' sheets, nursery cloths, polishing rags, or bandages. A tablecloth has been stained with candle grease. The laundress has tried hot water and soap, but the mark remains. The housekeeper recommends covering the stain with brown paper and pressing it carefully with a warm iron so that the paper absorbs the grease. This is an old household practice, passed from servant to servant, rather than learned from scientific instruction. Other stains call for salt, lemon, sour milk, chalk, ox gall, or sunlight. Victorian homes depend upon an enormous body of practical knowledge rarely recorded under the names of the women who possess it. A skilled housekeeper knows how to revive black silk, remove mildew, store apples, recognize watered milk, judge the freshness of eggs, and estimate how long candles should burn before a servant is suspected of waste. Much of this knowledge has deeper roots. Medieval manor households also guarded linen, salt, wax, grain, and spices beneath the control of trusted officers. Abbeys kept careful records of ale, smoked fish, pottage grain, lamp oil, and cloth. The Victorian account book is neater and the cupboards more specialised. But the underlying concern is familiar. A large household survives only when someone remembers what is being used and what must last through winter. The lady agrees that the damaged sheets should be cut down rather than discarded. The next paper concerns repairs. A window in the upper passage admits rain during storms. The carpenter inspected it yesterday and believes the frame has warped. The nursery bell pull has also become unreliable, and one of the kitchen range doors no longer closes properly. Repairs are constant in an old house. Roof slates loosen, pipes freeze, plaster cracks, wallpaper peels near damp walls, and bells cease to ring at exactly the moment they are most needed. Grand houses appear permanent from the road, but inside they demand continuous attention. The lady authorises the carpenter to return. The housekeeper then hesitates slightly before raising the matter of the servants. A young housemaid has complained of pain in her wrist. She dropped a water jug the previous evening, though it did not break. The cook believes the girl is careless. The housekeeper suspects she may simply be exhausted. The lady asks whether the wrist is swollen. Only a little. A cold cloth has been applied, and the girl has been excused from carrying coal. If the pain continues, the local doctor may need to examine it. Until then, another maid will take part of her work. Illness among servants creates both human concern and practical difficulty. A household cannot easily stop because one worker is unwell. Duties are redistributed, often increasing the strain upon everyone else. Some employers show patience, others dismiss servants whose health interferes too frequently with work. Historians continue to debate how typical the compassionate mistress described in family memoirs truly was. Those memories were often written by the families themselves. While servants left fewer accounts, kindness certainly existed, but so did long hours, poor rooms, low wages, and the constant risk of losing one's place. The lady instructs the housekeeper to provide the maid with liniment and to let her rest for the afternoon. Camphorated oil, arnica, or a warm mustard cloth might be used for such pain. Mustard poultices are believed to draw illness outward through heat, though they can burn the skin if left too long. Country households may prefer comfrey leaves, long associated with bruises and broken bones. The old herb was sometimes called knitbone, a name that carried more confidence than certainty. The housekeeper nods and turns the page. There are wages to record, candles to order, and a shortage of good soap in the laundry. The coal merchant has raised his price again. 2 pounds of tea remain in the locked caddy. Enough for the family, but perhaps not for the servants' hall if deliveries are delayed. The cook requests nutmeg, pepper, and a fresh jar of mustard. Every item is weighed against expense. A wealthy house can still be wasteful, and waste is considered a moral failure when it occurs below stairs. Servants are warned against allowing fires to burn too high, cutting bread too thickly, using excessive candles, or leaving meat uncovered. Yet extravagant dinners may be given for guests without the same scrutiny. Economy often travels downward more strictly than upward. The lady asks to see the household accounts. The book is ruled into columns: meat, fish, bread, milk, groceries, coal, candles, repairs, and miscellaneous expenses. Figures march down the page in dark ink. The handwriting is firm and narrow, each total checked twice. One entry concerns the purchase of beeswax candles for the drawing room. They are cleaner and more pleasant than tallow candles, but far more expensive. Tallow gives off smoke and a faint animal smell, making it better suited to servants' rooms and passages. Gaslighting has reached many urban homes, but some families distrust it, fearing leaks, headaches, or damage to ceilings and furnishings. Even in modern rooms, candlelight retains its place. It flatters faces, softens furniture, and makes evening gatherings feel more intimate. The cost of that softness is counted here in the morning. The housekeeper closes the account book. Outside, the last rain clouds have moved beyond the garden. Sunlight now lies across the wet lawn, and droplets shine briefly upon the hedges before falling into the dark soil. From somewhere near the back courtyard comes the steady beat of a rug being cleaned. A bell rings below stairs, followed by quick footsteps and then quiet again. The consultation is nearly finished. There remains the matter of charity parcels promised earlier. The housekeeper will select 2 older but serviceable blankets from the linen room. A basket of bread, tea, and broth ingredients can be prepared for the sick family near the estate boundary. The lady asks that it be sent without ceremony. The housekeeper rises. Her keys move softly against one another as she gathers the papers. For the next several hours, she will travel through kitchens, cupboards, passages, storerooms, and servants' rooms, translating decisions into work. The lady will move through more visible spaces, receiving callers and managing obligations that belong to her rank. Both women direct the same household, but they inhabit different versions of it. The door closes behind the housekeeper. For a moment, the lady remains by the breakfast room window, looking across the brightening garden. The private morning has widened again. Beyond the glass, wet roads, waiting carriages, parish duties, shops, and visiting rooms where every arrival will be measured by the clock. The clock in the hall is approaching 11 when the lady leaves the breakfast room. The household has settled into its full daytime rhythm now. Servants move behind closed doors and along hidden passages. The kitchen range burns steadily. A maid carries a basket of folded linen toward the upper floor, while somewhere near the back entrance a tradesman waits to have his delivery inspected. The morning is no longer private, yet it is not quite public either. Before visitors arrive or the carriage is brought to the front steps, the lady returns briefly to the hall mirror. Her maid is waiting with the final articles required beyond the sheltered rooms of the house gloves: bonnet, mantle, and a small reticule containing a handkerchief, calling cards, coins, and the silver vinaigrette checked earlier that morning. The bonnet is chosen according to weather and purpose. For a short walk, it might be made from felt or quilted silk, trimmed with modest ribbon and lined beneath the brim with a softer colour that reflects gently upon the face. A summer bonnet may be fashioned from straw and decorated with artificial flowers. Today, the damp road and uncertain sky call for something darker and more practical. The maid places the bonnet carefully over the arranged hair. Ribbons are tied beneath the chin, not so tightly that they crease the skin, but firmly enough to withstand the breeze. Bonnets do more than complete an outfit. They frame the face, protect the complexion from sun, and signal age, wealth, mourning status, and fashion. Their brims can also narrow a woman's view, encouraging her to turn her whole body rather than simply glance sideways. No one can quite agree whether this restricted vision was considered part of proper feminine modesty or merely an inconvenient result of changing style. Fashion writers praised the bonnet's graceful outline, while women wearing it had to avoid low branches, umbrella tips, and approaching carriages they could not easily see. The ladies' gloves are pale grey kid leather. Gloves are expected in public, even during mild weather. Bare hands outside the home may appear unfinished, overly familiar, or suggestive of labour. A lady removes her gloves for meals and certain indoor activities, but during calls, church attendance, shopping, and carriage rides they remain part of respectable dress. The maid works each glove over the fingers slowly. Fine leather fits closely and must not be pulled carelessly at the seams. The buttons at the wrist are fastened with a tiny hook. A short mantle is settled across the lady's shoulders. It is made from dark wool and lined for warmth. Though the rain has stopped, the air remains cool enough to justify it. A small umbrella is placed in her hand. The lady is now prepared for the world beyond the front door. Yet she may not simply leave whenever she pleases. Morning and afternoon visits are governed by recognised hours. To call too early risks finding the household occupied with breakfast, servants, correspondence, or dressing. To arrive too late may interrupt luncheon or the preparations for dinner. The precise acceptable time varies by decade, city, and social circle, but respectable callers often appear from late morning into the afternoon. A call itself should usually be brief. 10 or 15 minutes may be enough when the visit is formal. A close friend may remain longer, but an acquaintance who settles deeply into a chair and ignores every sign of departure risks becoming a burden. The hostess can ring for tea, introduce another subject, or glance discreetly toward the clock, though open impatience would be impolite. The front door bell rings. The lady pauses in the hall while the footman crosses toward the entrance. Through the glass panel beside the door, a carriage can be seen waiting at the curb. Its horses stand in the damp road, their harness fittings dark with rain. A visiting card is presented. It belongs to the neighbour who wrote earlier, arriving sooner than expected but still within acceptable hours. The lady hands her umbrella back to the maid and turns toward the morning room. The visitor is shown inside. She wears a deep blue travelling dress and carries the faint coolness of the outdoor air with her. Her bonnet ribbons are damp at the edges. The two women greet one another with warmth restrained by custom. Hands may be touched lightly, but embraces are reserved for close family or intimate friends. The caller comments upon the weather. This is not empty conversation. Weather determines roads, journeys, health, clothing, gardens, and the likelihood of future visits. A morning shower can delay a carriage, spoil a hem, worsen a cough, or make country lanes nearly impassable. The visitor has come partly to discuss a parish sewing meeting, and partly to bring news of a family returning from London. The details are offered carefully. Someone has taken a house nearby. A daughter is expected to be presented during the next season. An elderly aunt remains unwell. Victorian social news travels through letters, calls, servants, shops, railway journeys, and church gatherings. Information rarely arrives as simple fact. It is softened by hesitation, altered by politeness, and occasionally embroidered during its passage from one drawing room to another. Those who recorded such conversations never fully agreed where harmless interest ended and gossip began. The lady listens without appearing overly curious. Tea is not always served during a very brief morning call, though the visitor is offered a small cup because the weather has been cold. A maid enters carrying a tray with remarkable quietness. Cups are poured, sugar offered, and the parish meeting is fixed for the following Thursday. The two women also discuss the road near the village church. Recent rain has deepened the ruts, making travel difficult for elderly parishioners. The lady suggests that gravel from the estate yard might be sent to the worst section. Roads are often maintained unevenly, with responsibility divided between parishes, landowners, toll authorities, and local labour. Turnpike roads charge travellers at gates, where market carts, coaches, drovers, and private carriages pay according to vehicle and animal. Lesser lanes may remain muddy for much of the winter. Even in the Victorian age of expanding railways, a short journey between house and village can still resemble the slow travel of the earlier centuries. A roadside shrine would now be unusual in Protestant England, yet old stone crosses, parish boundary markers, and weathered churchyard gates still stand beside routes once used by pilgrims. Local people may preserve beliefs about certain wells, trees, or paths. Speaking of luck and misfortune, even while insisting they have no patience for superstition, the visitor finishes her tea and places the cup upon its saucer. There is a subtle pause. It is the proper moment to depart. She rises, thanks the lady, and promises to send the final list of sewing materials. The footman brings her cloak. Within minutes, the carriage door closes, the wheels turn across the wet road, and the visit has ended without ever feeling hurried. The lady waits until the sound fades. Her own carriage is now ready. Outside the front entrance stands a closed brougham, dark and polished, with a coachman seated high above and a footman near the door. The horses shift upon the stones, releasing pale breath into the cool air. The lady steps carefully beneath the lifted skirt of her gown. Her maid ensures that the hem does not brush the damp step. Once inside, the hoops compress slightly against the seat before settling around her. The carriage begins to move. Through the window, the house recedes behind iron gates. The road beyond is busy with delivery carts, pedestrians, servants carrying baskets, and tradesmen pushing barrows. Mud gathers along the edges where wheels have cut deeply into the softened ground. A woman of rank rarely walks alone through such streets. She may be accompanied by a maid, female relative, husband, or suitable companion. Respectability depends partly upon being observed under the proper circumstances. A solitary walk might invite questions, particularly in unfamiliar districts. Yet walking itself is praised as healthful. Physicians recommend fresh air and moderate movement, while etiquette insists that the movement be controlled, properly dressed, and undertaken at an appropriate hour. The lady's life is filled with such balances: exercise without exertion, sociability without familiarity, beauty without obvious artifice, knowledge without public ambition. The carriage turns toward the market square. Stalls stand beneath striped awnings, their boards displaying bread, vegetables, ribbons, crockery, and household goods. The church rises above the rooftops, its stone darkened by rain. A bell sounds from the tower, rolling across the square as people pass beneath it without looking up. For a moment, the lady observes the ordinary morning beyond the glass: a porter carrying a crate, a flower seller arranging damp violets, a servant bargaining over eggs, and an old man warming his hands beside a brazier. Then the carriage continues onward. By noon, she will have called at a shop, spoken with the parish clerk, and perhaps walked briefly along a sheltered path where the wet trees shine under the clearing sky. Her private morning has become a sequence of visible duties, each one measured by clothing, clocks, distance, and custom. Behind her, the bedroom fire is beginning to fade. Ahead lie luncheon, afternoon visitors, and the wider social life of the day. By the time the carriage turns back toward the house, the hands of the church clock are drawing close to noon. The streets have changed since the lady first looked from her bedroom window. Delivery carts now crowd the road. Shop doors stand open, and market voices rise beneath awnings still wet from the morning rain. The quiet grey world before breakfast has become busy and visible, filled with errands, appointments, and people moving beneath the expectations of the day. Inside the carriage, the lady rests one gloved hand upon her reticule. A few purchases lie beside her sewing silk for the parish meeting, a packet from the chemist, and a small bundle of stationery wrapped in brown paper. She has spoken with the clerk, left a visiting card, approved the gravel for the church road, and listened to several pieces of news that will require tactful replies before evening. None of these duties is dramatic. Victorian respectability is built largely from such small acts performed repeatedly: remembering a name, answering a letter, choosing the correct hour to call, providing a blanket without appearing charitable for praise, and keeping the machinery of a household moving while allowing it to seem almost motionless. The carriage passes through the iron gates. A footman waits beneath the portico and opens the door. The lady steps down carefully, lifting the front of her gown just enough to avoid the damp stones. Her skirt falls back into place as soon as she reaches the dry hall, hiding the practical movement beneath an appearance of calm. Her maid receives the umbrella and removes the outdoor mantle. The bonnet ribbons are untied, the gloves eased from each finger, and a faint streak of road dust brushed from the hem. The transformation takes only a few minutes. The woman who left the house prepared for weather and observation becomes once more the mistress of an interior world, yet she does not return to the privacy of the bedroom. Luncheon will soon be served. More letters may have arrived. A child may need permission for an outing. The cook may require a decision, or another caller may appear before the hour has properly turned. The morning room is bright now. Sunlight lies across the carpet, revealing the pattern more clearly than the early firelight did. A vase of winter greenery stands near the window. On the table rests the post brought during her absence, along with the parish list promised by her neighbour. She sits and opens the first envelope. Upstairs, the bedroom is empty. The bed curtains have been arranged, the mattress aired, and the pillows returned to their places. The basin has been washed and dried. The medicine spoon has been put away. Brushes lie in a silver-backed row upon the dressing table, and the little hair receiver is closed beneath its pierced lid. The fire has begun to fade. No servant will rebuild it unless the lady expects to return before evening. The coal settles inward, its red light dimming beneath a skin of ash. Warmth remains near the hearth, but the distant corners of the room are cooling again. The private mourning survives only in traces. There is a faint scent of lavender near the mirror, a crease in the cushion before the dressing table, and a pale circle upon the polished wood where the early teacup once stood. The journal remains clasped shut beside the prayer book. Whatever sentence the lady wrote during those quiet minutes is hidden from every person now moving through the house. Perhaps it will be read many years later. Perhaps a daughter will open the book after her mother's death and recognize familiar names among descriptions of rain, headaches, servants, flowers, and family visits. Perhaps the pages will remain inside a drawer until the handwriting fades. Many journals were destroyed because they seemed too private, too ordinary, or too painful to preserve. Historians continue to debate how much of women's daily life disappeared in this way. Public records remembered marriages, property, births, deaths, and formal events. They rarely recorded the temperature of washwater, the number of hairpins lost beneath a carpet, or the quiet relief of sitting alone before breakfast. Yet daily life is made from precisely these details. A warm basin carried upstairs, a corset lace loosened when it pressed too sharply, a prayer spoken without sound, a letter sealed in blue wax, a housekeeper's keys moving gently at her waist. The objects differ from those used by women centuries before, but the rhythm has older echoes. A medieval noblewoman rising in a cold manor chamber also depended upon servants, linen garments, combs, warmed water, and bells marking the hour. She might have prayed from a painted book of hours, used beeswax candles, and worn herbs in a small pouch against illness. The Victorian lady believed herself separated from that world by industry, railways, gaslight, and modern medicine. Still, when the church bell crossed wet fields and stone walls, the sound remained much as it had been for generations. Time moved through the morning in measured stages. Nightdress became chemise. Loose hair became a polished coil. The private face became the composed face of the household. Bedroom silence widened into breakfast conversation, household accounts, visiting calls, and the movement of a carriage through town. By noon, almost nothing remained of the woman who had stood barefoot beside the bed. This disappearance was not deception. It was the daily work of becoming visible. The public lady required preparation layers of fabric, practiced posture, remembered etiquette, and the skilled labour of other women. Her composure was not effortless. It was created each morning and gently taken apart each night. Below stairs, luncheon is nearly ready. A kitchen maid carries a warm dish toward the service passage. The housekeeper checks the table linen. A footman listens for the bell. The servant whose wrist was painful has been allowed to rest beside a small attic window, with a cloth wrapped around her hand. Life continues through every level of the house. The lady finishes reading the newly arrived letter and places it upon the table. She looks briefly toward the garden, where the last drops of rain are falling from the branches. Beyond the wall, wheels pass along the road, softer now beneath the drying mud. The clock begins to strike 12. Each note enters the house slowly. One settles in the hall, another seems to pass upward through the staircase. Another reaches the quiet bedroom where the ashes almost covered the fire. For generations, such bells had summoned monks to prayer, opened market days, warned villagers of danger, and guided travellers along uncertain roads. Here, they simply announce that morning has ended. The lady rises as the final note fades. Her green gown moves softly across the carpet. She straightens one paper, touches the brooch at her collar, and turns toward the duties waiting beyond the door. Years will pass. The gown will be altered, then folded away. The silver brushes may belong to a daughter. The house may receive electric light, running water, and pipes that carry warmth without coal scuttles or soot. Servants will become fewer. Bonnets will vanish. Corsets will loosen and change. The bedroom itself may be redecorated until no trace of this morning can be seen, but for a little while longer, it remains suspended in the quiet of noon. The bed is smooth beneath its heavy curtains. The prayer book rests beside the window. The mirror holds only an empty room. A final ember darkens in the grate while pale daylight moves across the worn wooden furniture. Outside, the road stretches beyond the gates, past the market square and the stone church, toward villages, winter fields, and distant houses where other mornings are already becoming memories. The bells grow silent. The servants' footsteps fade down the passage. And the private world of the Victorian lady, assembled so carefully between darkness and dawn, slips gently into the long, quiet procession of vanished days. Sweet dreams.